This is America's most evil retreat, Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove.
Bohemian Grove.
A restricted 2,700-acre campground where the elite go to discuss world events and participate in ancient pagan rituals. The evidence is there. The Grove exists. It is true that presidents, politicians, and bankers all willingly congregate here every July to do shady stuff in the woods. These men at the top of the food chain look forward to this getaway every single year. It's time to expose everything about Bohemian Grove, the playground of the American elite.
Crow of Elysium, we honor thee!
We honor thee! We honor thee! We honor thee!
No mortal flame can destroy common woe. Just one fire can conquer. Fire that burns in the fields of Elysium.
Hail, brothers! Many brothers!
Brothers many, make brothers one. Hail fellowship, hail Crow in this verdant kingdom. Common woe be done.
Hail, brothers! Common woe be done! Set us free! Set us free! Set us free! Set us free!
Midsummer sets us free!
Set us free! Set us free! Set us free! Set us free! Set us free! Set us free!
Look around. Some of the most powerful men in the world are gathered in this clearing. Members of one of our country's most exclusive clubs. Invitation only, unless, of course, you invite yourself. They gather here to seek God between the branches of these magnificent trees. They eat together, they piss next to each other.
The Bohemian Club? As you say, the Bohemian Club? That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right? I've never been to the Bohemian Club, but you ought to go. It'd be good for you. Get some fresh air.
And they carve up the world like a Sunday roast. This is where the real power is. No women or presidents allowed. The former I am not, the latter I will be again. Because I have managed to reduce a national election down to one state. And while these men here can't swing the votes of an entire nation, one measly state, well, that they can do. And that's why I'm here. So welcome to Elysian Fields.
Let's look at Northern California. You understand?
Yeah.
You know what's happened in San Francisco.
San Francisco just gone.
It's
Clear
over.
over.
I know that, but it isn't just down in the ratty part of town. But the upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove that I attend on time to time, the Easterners and the others that come there. But it is the most faggy goddamn thing you will ever imagine. A San Francisco crowd that goes in there. It's just terrible. I mean, I never want to shake hands with anybody in San Francisco.
Dude, I'm actually here. This is insane. No way. Bohemian Grove is, I'm here. I'm doing it.
What's the purpose behind the owl? Why do the leaders of America use it at the Bohemian Grove, gathering around a 40-foot statue of one during their initiation ceremony, the cremation of care? When we look at the dollar bill, hidden in the upper right-hand corner is what appears to be a depiction of an owl. The owl seems to appear in a similar bohemian-esque form at the bottom of the bill. Strangely, when you fold a $2 bill, you get a strikingly similar outline of the Bohemian Grove version of the owl. Some people like to believe that this hidden symbol on the dollar bill is nothing more than the end of the webbed pattern beside it, or even a mistake. However, the other side of the bill doesn't have the same mistake or mirror the end of the pattern. Some people even think it's a spider, but even the spider has direct ties to Bohemian Grove. Engraved on the entrance sign for Bohemian Grove is the club's motto, "Weaving spiders come not here," a reference from Act 2, Scene 2 of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. The spider reference ties back directly to others' beliefs that the hidden symbol on the dollar is in fact a spider. The meaning behind the weaving spiders phrase is to leave all of their outside cares at the door during their weekly retreat in July. Leaving cares behind seems to play an important part in the cremation of care ritual. Going back to the owl, our monetary bills seem to reference it symbolically. But what if I told you the symbol goes much deeper than that? Statues of the owl appear all over Yale's campus and all over New York City. If you look from a satellite view above the US Capitol building, you can see a clear outline of an owl, its eyes, torso, tail feather, and wing spread, which extends from the streets away from the Capitol. Washington, D.C.'s physical framework was designed by famous French Freemason Pierre Lafont. If you don't know anything about Freemasonry, I suggest you watch Phase 1 to catch up to speed. The Illuminati is a fact, not fiction. Adam Weishaupt was a German philosopher and founder of the Illuminati. He founded the Bavarian Illuminati on May 1st, 1776, which consisted of several Freemasons, including Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The symbol of the Illuminati wasn't originally the all-seeing eye of Providence, but was actually an owl. How about the logo for the United States National Press? Its original logo depicts an owl, and beside it is a lamp and flame, a correlation which goes directly back to the lamp and flame displayed in front of the owl statue at Bohemian Grove. Disney. If we look at the animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, we will find that the House of the Dwarves is riddled with owl symbolism. Staircases, headboards, even an owl chair which looks oddly similar to the statue at Bohemian Grove. The cremation of care ritual is the grand climax of their visitation to the grove, where they gather around a 40-foot owl and perform a mock sacrifice of a human effigy. Some believe that the term human effigy is merely a cover-up of actual sacrifices which take place. Everyone gathers on the other side of the lake to watch the play unfold, but there's something very off with the play. Before we talk about the cremation of care ceremony, let's look at the history behind the grove. The origin of the Bohemian name stems from Bohemia, a region found in the Czech Republic. The word Bohemia comes from the name Boy, an ancient Celtic tribe that once populated the area. Bohemian is also used to define someone who lives an unconventional lifestyle, a free spirit who isn't tied down by anyone or anything. Among the Bohemia region lives a society with several similarities to the Grove. The Schlaraffia is a secret German society that started in Bohemia in 1859, situated mainly in the capital of the Czech Republic, Prague. Their rituals, by nature, draw several similarities to the Freemasons. Just like the Bohemian Club, the Schlaraffia were all about having a good time, just as noted on their main website. And I quote, "Schlaraffia is a worldwide association of men committed to cultivating art, friendship, and humor. Their motto is, in arte voluptas, or in art lies the pleasure," end quote. Presently, they have about 260 associations and over 10,000 Sassons, or members, in Europe. Another similarity between this society and the Bohemian Club is that it consists of musicians, poets, composers, painters, and magicians. Nobility from the Habsburg royal court is also involved. Like the Bohemians, membership today consists beyond the boundaries of artistry, including engineers, inventors, teachers, and other people groups. Even more similar is their symbol, the owl. To them, the Eurasian eagle owl represents wisdom. But what else could this symbol mean for a society so secret they can't even reveal what goes on behind closed doors in their initiations and rituals? German immigrants eventually brought its principles to the United States and San Francisco, and Bohemian Grove. The Bohemian Grove is a 2,700-acre virgin redwood grove in Northern California, 75 miles north of San Francisco, situated next to the small town of Monte Rio on the Russian River. This is a place where the rich, powerful, and entourage visit with each other during the last 2 weeks of July while camping out in cabins and tents. It's owned by the Bohemian Club, which was founded in San Francisco in 1872. Founders consisted of a small group of San Francisco journalists, writers, actors, and lawyers who wanted to have a place where they could go to enjoy the arts and put together amateur artistic performances. Many Bohemians were corporate chieftains, members of policy planning groups, trustees of think tanks and opinion-shaping groups, and members of social clubs all over the country. The Grove has hosted captains of industries, well-known television stars, bankers, famous artists, and even presidents along with members from their cabinet. At least one officer or director from 40 of the 50 largest industrial corporations in America have been present over the years at the Grove, mainly as a member or guest.
Now a question. What have Herbert Hoover, Art Linkletter, Jack London, and Richard Nixon all had in common? Well, they've all been members of the exclusive all-male Bohemian Club in California, where every year at this time, the elite from around the country get together for 2.5 weeks of fun and games. Steve Shepard has this special assignment report.
More than 2,000 members of San Francisco's exclusive and all-male Bohemian Club have once again descended on Northern California. These men will spend most of the month of July encamped on some 2,700 acres of pristine and privately owned redwood forest. Forest very much like this. The place is called Bohemian Grove, and it's located just 80 miles north of San Francisco. The Grove is the Bohemian Club's summer retreat, and its facilities are hidden beneath lush forest canopy extending south from the banks of Sonoma County's Russian River. For more than a century, the camp has been a place where club members and guests from all across America gather to relax. The retreat is divided into dozens of small camps, the most prominent of which is called Mandalay. Among its members are businessmen like Leonard Firestone and Edgar Kaiser, and political figures like Gerald Ford, Henry Kissinger, William French Smith, and George Shultz. President Reagan, Vice President Bush, and Defense Secretary Weinberger are members of other camps. Richard Nixon is a Bohemian, and so are high-ranking executives of such companies as Eastern Airlines, Standard Oil of Indiana, and Bank of America. For the most part, the men of Bohemian Grove are over 50, highly successful, and, according to many employees, politically conservative.
Well, each year, many of them seem to have a stunt or try to come up with a stunt. Last year, in 1980, the popular button was Free the Fortune 500.
Membership in the Grove is by invitation only and is determined by such factors as social standing, occupation, and personal connections. Privacy is one of the Grove's most cherished virtues. Members may not photograph, record, speak, or write about activities at the retreat. While many public officials are Grove members, the press is a distinctly unwelcome guest.
We're from ABC News.
Well, get back there. Get back there.
Can we talk to somebody in the...
Get back there.
Anyone willing to navigate a boat up the Russian River can get a glimpse of the northern edge of the compound, but that's about all. Still, there are outsiders who have researched the Grove. Sociology professor William Dumhoff found out enough to write a book on the place.
Well, I think it's a playground for the powerful. It's a place where wealthy men from all over the United States gather for 2 weeks to relive summer camp with this ceremony called the Cremation of Care that begins the 2-week encampment where the body of dull care, symbolizing woes and concerns, is burned on an altar in front of a big owl statue. When that ceremony ends, they all start to cheer and yell and hand each other a beer.
Other regular activities include the production of 2 plays, one of which involves major sets, orchestral music, and extravagant costumes. The other play appears to be just a bit on the lighter side, at least judging from these old photos. Members also spend time swimming, hiking, relaxing in the sun, and doing a bit of drinking from the Grove's own privately labeled spirits. Like a boys' camp, the Grove has a symbol, in this case a somewhat fierce-looking owl. It also has a patron saint, St. John of Nepomuk, a legitimate 13th century Bohemian canonized for his sense of honor. What the Grove does not have is any women, not even as employees. Despite its camp-like atmosphere, the Grove does host some serious business.
To the degree that there's anything important happens at the Bohemian Grove, it's political. The important speeches that have been made at the Bohemian Grove have been made, for instance, and the best example, by Richard Nixon. Eisenhower gave a speech there. It was the first time the West Coast establishment really saw him close up.
Discussions at the Grove in the 1930s helped lead to the development of nuclear power and the atomic bomb. It was at the Grove in 1967 that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan hashed out differences over their presidential ambitions. Each year, guests like Henry Kissinger or Zbigniew Brzezinski address members on their areas of expertise. Presidential counselor Edwin Meese will be among this year's speakers. And each year, other guests come to the Grove simply to enjoy themselves. This year, CIA Director William Casey is a scheduled guest of John McCone, former CIA Director. Baseball Commissioner Bowie Kuhn has been invited as a guest of baseball owner Peter O'Malley. Despite the presence of so many notables, the Grove is not without its small headaches. Anti-nuclear demonstrators gathered near the entrance to the retreat this year to wave signs and chant slogans. The Grove is also facing a suit from the state of California because it refuses to hire women. Still, the Bohemian Grove seems in no danger of passing. Herbert Hoover called it the world's greatest men's party, and there is a list of powerful people waiting to get in on it. Steve Shepard, ABC News, San Francisco.
Each year at the end of July, nearly 1,500 men gather together at the Grove for this 2-week encampment. Captured in this image of a meeting at Bohemian Grove in 1957 are well-known elites David Rockefeller, Ronald Reagan, Glenn T. Seaborg, and Richard Nixon. Seaborg headed the plutonium work on the Manhattan Project, spearheading production for advances in nuclear technology. Other Bohemians helped with the Manhattan Project, and discussions for this most likely arose at the Grove. In Nixon's 1978 book titled The Memoirs of Richard Nixon, he mentions his encounters with Hoover and Eisenhower, and I quote, "In the summer of 1950, I saw him at even closer quarters at the Bohemian Grove, the site of the annual summer retreat of San Francisco's Bohemian Club, where each year members of this prestigious private men's club and their guests from all over the country gather amidst California's beautiful redwoods. Herbert Hoover used to invite some of the most distinguished of the 1,400 men at the Grove to join him at his caveman camp for lunch each day. On this occasion, Eisenhower, then president of Columbia University, was the honored guest. Hoover sat at the head of the table as usual, with Eisenhower at his right." End quote. Other notable elites, House Speaker Newt Gingrich and President Bush, spoke at the Lakeside Talk in front of the Owl at the 1995 encampment. Bush was even noted for saying that his son, George W. Bush, would make a great future president someday. That aged well. The Bohemian Grove camps began with tents and traditions. Names like Cliff Dwellers, Moonshiners, Silverado Squatters, Woof, Zaka, Toyland, Sun Dodgers, and Land of Happiness found their homes in the Grove. There are about 120 camps today, between 10 to 30 members each on average. People describe the camps as similar to a fraternity system, which mirrors some of the same concepts found in Freemasonry. Here's a closer look at some of the other camps and who they consist of. The fact that rich men from all over the country gather together at Bohemian Grove is evidence for the existence of a socially cohesive upper class. Most of these men know each other very well and are part of the same social network. One might conclude that the cohesiveness of the upper class is maintained through these gatherings, and even through the cremation of care ceremony. The highlight of the Grove encampment is an opening day initiation ceremony called the Cremation of Care, in which the campers are given permission to forget their worldly duties and responsibilities, and instead focus on having a good time, just like in the old days, when they were young and supposedly carefree. That night they have their first dinner in the huge open-air dining circle. They hear welcome speeches, they give a cheer to the old guard, those who have been in the club for 40 or more years, and they pay their respects to the fallen leaves, those who have died in the past year. But the highlight of the evening is the cremation of care, an initiation into the spirit of the encampment. The ceremony, which takes place on the first night of the encampment, has happened every year since 1880. Several men carry an open coffin with what appears to be a lifelike human body, or sacrificial effigy, consisting of black muslin wrapped around a wooden skeleton. This effigy, named as Mr. Dole Care, is cremated the first Saturday night at the ceremony in front of the owl, symbolizing the concerns and woes these men bear in their daily lives. Greek mythology courses itself throughout the cremation of care play, as the opening scene contains a hamadryad, or a tree spirit, who in Greek mythology is bound to the tree it abides in. The spirit demands the Bohemians to burn away the sorrows of yesterday and to cast your grief to the fires and be strong with the holy trees and the spirit of the grove. Weaving spiders, come not here. This line, as spoken earlier, is taken from Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, and it's supposed to warn members not to discuss business and worldly concerns, instead concentrating on the arts, literature, and other pleasures within the portals of Bohemia. They chant, "Midsummer sets us free," as a way of being freed from their care during the encampment, burning away their cares for the outside world with the effigy, Mr. Dole Care. The flame that burns from the lamp of fellowship consumes away their care. There is only one fire that can overcome the great enemy care, and that, of course, is this very flame situated on the altar. "Hail fellowship," he concludes, "and thou, Dole Care, be gone." When we play back the clip from Alex Jones's documentary where he infiltrated Bohemian Grove in the year 2000, we can hear someone screaming, almost as if someone is actually being sacrificed. So what does the owl really symbolize for the elites at this retreat? It's been purposely embedded into our dollar bills and the grounds at Washington, D.C. But what for? And why would they go about this secretly from the public? There are several identities for this owl, but let's start with Minerva. If we look at the Bohemian Club headquarters in San Francisco, they own an Athenian owl made directly after the one displayed in the Acropolis Museum from c. 500 BC. This exact replica, which sits in their library, could be what the elites truly associate the owl with, which would be the Greco-Roman goddess of wisdom Athena, or Minerva. The Greek goddess of wisdom is most often depicted with a small owl, either in person or as a decoration on her gear. Ancient Greeks believed the owl possessed an inner light, or divine wisdom which helped it see in the dark. In this case, the owl symbol is chosen to represent mortal wisdom, especially when we hear this line during the cremation of care, and I quote, "O thou, great symbol of mortal wisdom," he cries, "Owl of Bohemia, we do beseech thee, grant us thy counsel." End quote. It seems that this symbol would most likely represent Minerva, the Roman goddess of wisdom. In Greek mythology, the counterpart of Minerva is Athena. Her symbol, of course, is the owl. It would be easy to close the case on Minerva and leave it be. But if we trace our steps back to the Bavarian Illuminati in Germany, we will find that Adam Weishaupt not only used the owl as his primary symbol for the group, but created the Minerval degree within his secret society. The Minerval degree, or Brethren of Minerva, was above the Novus degree. There are 3 degrees in the Bavarian Illuminati: Novus, Minerval, and Illuminatus Minerval. These degrees were rather preparatory for further initiations where true secrets would be revealed. They also mirror the 3 degrees of the Masonic Rite: Entered Apprentice, Fellow Crafts, and Master Mason. Another reason for use of the owl was that just like this bird, the Bavarian Illuminati would operate at night in secret meeting rooms. If we think about the ties between the Illuminati and the cremation of care ceremony, those in the Bavarian Society would recite the Ode to Wisdom poem by Elizabeth Carter during their ceremonies. This poem mentions the owl as a feminine creature, and one of the lines alludes to the cremation of care act, and I quote, "the dole rewards of care," end of quote. If we think about Mr. Dole Care, the cremated body before the 40-foot owl deity at Bohemian Grove, It seems that the Bavarian Illuminati initiates of the 18th century were using similar terminology in their meetings. The Bavarian Illuminati also began May 1st of 1776, just before the United States founded itself upon Freemasonic virtues on July 4th. They also formed shortly after Freemasonry began officially in England during 1717. I bring up Freemasonry due to the inspiration it gave Adam Weishaupt when he created the Illuminati, and also because of Freemasonry's secret fraternal order named the Order of Owls. The Triple O consists of only Master Masons, those at the highest degree, and each lodge is called a nest. By the 1920s, they had 600,000 members and 2,148 of these lodges. One of their early petitions says this on the back page, which reads, and I quote, "Observe the satanic grin with which they will say, well, I should remark. My boy, if you are not an owl, you are strictly not in it." End of quote. Satanic grin. That's a very interesting choice of words. I wonder which master they serve. The next goddess the owl could represent is Ishtar, the Mesopotamian goddess of love and war, and also fertility. If we compare Ishtar with this baked clay terracotta plaque, which dates back to ancient Babylon, we will find many similarities. This art piece is called the Burney relief, also known as the Queen of the Night, created in the 19th to 18th century BCE. Scholars go back and forth in their debates for who they believe this goddess to represent, which would either be Ishtar, Lilith, or Ereshkigal. Notice the owls to the left and right of the deity. Ishtar is also known as the divine Lady Owl. This classification, although not as compelling as Minerva, is another viable candidate for Minerva, but as we soon will find out, there is much more to this claim. Lilith. Lilith is another Mesopotamian figure, and in Jewish folklore is queen of the demons. In rabbinic literature, she is depicted as the mother of Adam's demonic offspring after his separation from Eve in the Garden of Eden. What is so interesting about her relation to Bohemian Grove is that she is usually depicted as either a winged serpent or a screech owl who kidnaps children and murders them. Bohemian Grove poet George Sterling wrote a play known as Lilith in 1920, where Lilith mentions the owl. This provides some credence to the idea that many Bohemians knew about her symbolism with the owl. Could this have been alluding to the secrets behind the symbol at the Grove? The last deity which the owl at Bohemian Grove could represent is the Canaanite deity associated with child sacrifice, Moloch. The name derives from combining the consonants of the Hebrew melech or king with the vowels of boshet or shame, the latter often being used in the Old Testament as a variant name for the popular god Baal or Lord. If we look to the Old Testament of the Bible in the book of Leviticus, we find that the laws given to Moses by God expressly forbade the Jews to do what was done in Egypt or in Canaan. And I quote, "You shall not give any of your children to devote them by fire to Moloch, and so profane the name of your God." Leviticus 18:21. Kings such as Ahaz and Manasseh were influenced by the Assyrians, and are reported to have worshipped Moloch at the hilled site of Topheth outside of the walls of Jerusalem. 2 Kings illustrates this in chapter 23, and I quote, "And he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, that no one might burn his son or his daughter as an offering to Moloch." 2 Kings 23:10. Medieval French rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki wrote an extensive commentary on Moloch in the 12th century. Here's an excerpt from one of his passages, and I quote, "Topheth is Moloch, which was made of brass, and they heated him from his lower parts, and his hands being stretched out and made hot, they put the child between his hands, and it was burnt. When it vehemently cried out, but the priest beat a drum, that the father might not hear the voice of his son, and his heart might not be moved." End quote. So what does Moloch have to do with the cremation of care and the owl at Bohemian Grove? Well, something interesting to note about ancient practices of sacrifice is that the method of performing appeasing rituals to their gods was usually through a cremation process. The owl comes into play when we realize that both Moloch and Baal, the Canaanite and Phoenician deity of fertility and weather, are one and the same. First, let's look to the Old Testament book of Jeremiah to compare these two deities. And I quote, "They built high places for Baal in the valley of Ben-Hinnom to sacrifice their sons and daughters to Molech, though I never commanded, nor did it enter my mind, that they should do such a detestable thing and so make Judah sin." Jeremiah 32:35. Baal is an all-powerful sun god, and in the Greek city of Palmyra, the ancients worshipped a sun god named Moloch Baal as late as 500 AD. Moloch and Baal seem to hold several similarities in the way they were worshipped. In Jeremiah 19, we read this about Baal, and I quote, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Behold, I am bringing such disaster upon this place that the ears of everyone who hears of it will tingle. Because the people have forsaken me and have profaned this place by making offerings in it to other gods, whom neither they nor their fathers nor the kings of Judah have known, and because they have filled this place with the blood of innocents, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind. Therefore, behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when this place shall no more be called Topheth, or the valley of the son of Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter." Jeremiah 19:3-6. So, what if you don't believe in the Bible? Well, here are some more historical cases for Moloch, or Baal's association with the owl symbol. The owl is part of the Egyptian hieroglyphic alphabet, representing what we call the letter M. This can stand for either Minerva or Moloch. However, in studying the 1905 lithograph book called The Inland Printer, American Lithographer, Volume 34, we find that the letter M in ancient Egyptian, written with the owl hieroglyph, is pronounced as Mulak. Mulak is another pronunciation for Moloch. Now we can see how Moloch and the owl at Bohemian Grove have uncanny similarities. Tracing back to Ishtar, we find that Baal's wife was Asherah. Asherah is another name for Ishtar, and each of these names from different regions highlight the same deity these people groups worshipped. So yes, Ishtar is Baal's winged and mysterious wife, and the divine Lady Owl. Even more, another Bohemian poet by the name of Allen Ginsberg wrote a poem called Howl in 1955. In it, he describes Moloch as a global capitalist and industry-loving machine. After researching each of these figures in depth, we can conclude that the owl statue at Bohemian Grove draws several parallels to wisdom, along with child kidnapping and sacrifice. One last thing to mention about Moloch is something directly related to Hillary Clinton's emails. In one of her leaked emails from an unknown entity by the name of Tree, the sender states, and I quote, "With fingers crossed, the old rabbit's foot out of the box in the attic, I will be sacrificing a chicken in the backyard to Moloch." End quote. Sacrificing a chicken in the backyard to Moloch? Those who attend Bohemian Grove annually look forward to the cremation of care more than anything else, and appear worshipful toward the owl at their shrine with an altar they sacrifice their cares to. Moloch does indeed have direct correlations to the owl at the Grove, but for those of you left who still don't believe in the validity of the darker roots of the retreat, take a look at the AOL World News Source. If you pronounce AOL phonetically, it sounds exactly like the word owl. Its logo is literally the Freemasonic pyramid capstone with the all-seeing eye centered in the middle of it. If you thought that was creepy, they even have their own database system called Moloch, recently updated to Archime, and their logo is literally a great horned owl. Just before he was assassinated, former President John F. Kennedy gave a speech about his thoughts towards secrecy. He voiced very clearly his opposition to secret societies, oaths, and proceedings, calling out Freemasons in the Order of Owls, the Bavarian Illuminati, and those who practice secrecy at Bohemian Grove. No wonder he was killed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
One last question. I read a Washington Times article many years ago where you had a comment about the organization, and then now it's been in the Wall Street Journal, it's been in a lot of different newspapers, and that's the Bohemian Grove. And back in, what was it, 1996, when you joined as a Clinton advisor, the Republicans were criticizing you, oh, what about Bohemian Grove? And then you countered them by saying, hey, I don't run around in the woods naked. What did that mean? Here is the before-mentioned Washington Times article where he said, I didn't run around naked like they do.
That's where all those rich Republicans go up and stand naked against redwood trees, right?
I don't know what quote you're referring to. I'm not aware of any quote like that. Listen, I am a happy member of the Bohemian Grove. I like the folks who come there, and it's really inappropriate for me to talk about the group beyond that. Thank you.
Have you been there for the ceremony with the cremation of care?
Frankly, I don't think that's something I need to talk to you about.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I'm Alex Jones, and I snuck in there in 2000. I'm the guy that blew it wide open and got the video. It's been on national TV.
Invitation only, unless, of course, you invite yourself.
Well, I disrespect you for that.
You do?
I do.
But it's a lot of big public officials going in there. Don't we deserve to know?
I don't know anything about you, and I don't know anything about your film. But if you go in there with an understanding, you violated that understanding by releasing that film, and I don't respect you for that.
Really? But we have public officials.
I'm sorry. You took an understanding when you went in there that you would not do that film, and did you have an understanding when you went in there?
No.
Did you crash it?
Yes.
Yeah, and it has no trespassing signs there too, doesn't it?
No, they put them up after.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just walked in.
I'm sorry, sir. I've been there before. I know what the circumstances are, and I'm sorry you violated the understandings. That was not a gentlemanly thing to do.
But what about the ritual? Is the ritual gentlemanly?
Sir, everything. I don't owe you this comment.
I know. I appreciate
it. This is what's called ambush journalism, and I disrespect you for that as well. So thank you and goodbye.
Have you ever been in the ritual?
That's none of your damn business.
Oh,
that's right. Listen. You go around and make understandings with people and violate them. You ambush people on the streets, and that's inappropriate form of journalism. If you wish to practice that, that's fine, but don't ask others to respect you for it. If you want to, you can do. You're free American, like anything you want. If you want to be uncivil and rude and ungentlemanly, that's up to you. But don't expect the rest of us to say, "Oh well, you're
there, Mr. Gergen."
I'm sorry, nobody sets policy in there. We try to be gentlemen, and obviously, you don't belong there.
Weaving spiders come out here.
Haven't you ever seen the Bohemian Grove footage where Alex Jones filmed all these elites dressing up like druids and worshiping the owl god Moloch? That's real, dude.
I know.
They really do that.
I know.
They do that. But what are you eye rolling?
I'm rolling that the Illuminati doesn't control the world because nobody's that organized.
Well, maybe they're not. But did you ever see that Bohemian Grove thing? That is absolutely 100% real. No, it's not. So what, Brian? It's people dressing up like wizards, saying some secret ritual.
Doesn't mean they control shit.
It's weird. Burning an effigy in front of an owl god.
Same with Burning Man.
Bro, this is so different than Burning Man. It's the government. It's people at the highest levels of banks. It's all these different famous people. There's a bunch of crazy, really rich, influential people that went to that Bohemian Grove and dressed up like druids and they chanted things. Yeah. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, I saw it.
You are.
Yeah, you haven't seen it. He hasn't seen it. He hasn't seen it.
I'm sorry.
He hasn't seen it. He just doesn't want you to put it on.
No, I did see it because you were talking about it and I didn't believe it.
You are. What do you mean you didn't believe it? John Ronson was there. John Ronson is a 100% credible journalist. Yeah. Whatever you might think about anybody else that was there, although different people that have made YouTube videos on it, John Bronson is legit as they come, straight down the middle, very intelligent.
But what do you think they're doing there? Are they?
I think they're doing a thing the same way they do the Skull and Bones, where they get together and they have a group where they all become a part of this group early on, and they feel some kinship, just like the Freemasons,
makes sense, yeah.
just like a lot of people. But this is very extreme, where they're chanting crazy shit. They're putting hoods on, and they're burning an effigy that's supposed to be a sacrificial person. It's straw in a bundle, and they do it in front of
doing that?
They talk about the owl god Moloch. Okay, these are multimillionaires. So he went and snuck in to this place where like former presidents go. There's a photograph of it's Ronald Reagan with Herbert Walker Bush and a couple other people all standing around. And it's like these are the people that used to hang out at this place, and they would put on robes and they would worship an owl god, and they would burn an effigy. And they're playing, and Alex snuck in and made video footage of this shit. And no one's denying that it's real. This really did happen. So they're in with these bankers and former presidents, and they're dressed like druids.
Yes.
And some guy brings over something it's an effigy that's supposed to be a body, a wrapped up effigy. It's also a bunch of sticks in a blanket, but it's like shaped like a body.
Yeah.
And then they drop it on the fire, and they're all worshiping an owl god.
Why is that bad?
Imagine if you saw those, if that's what your business is, just finding those things. How crazy you think you get?
Alex Jones is like,
Some of the stuff is real.
Take what's real and throw out the rest.
There's a good chunk of it that's real.
Like again, I don't know what's going on at the Bohemian Grove, but from what I've heard, it's basically a summer camp for billionaires where they try to get artists in there to like loosen them up a little bit. That's what I've heard. I could be wrong.
Who told you this? Is this?
I honestly can't say. Look, man, I don't know, and I know, and
Have you seen the video of Bohemian Grove? Have you seen it?
The ritual in front of the owl god.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
Oh, Andrew.
Hey, bro. All right, talk to us.
Bro, I don't give a bro. They held me down and they made me watch little kids get raped. I don't give a anymore.
Where?
Bro, they took me to the woods, bro, and they tied. I'm not joking, bro. I have proof, bro. I don't give a bro. I will show you every video you could ever believe. Bohemian Grove is real. They tied me down and they made me watch, dog. I absolutely don't give a anymore. Yes, I lost it. They're raping little kids, bro. You know the higher elites, bro. You already know who they are, bro.
You know the path you're going down is dangerous, my friend.
I don't give a.
Well, that's the first point of contention, because I care about you a lot, and I can assure you from my own personal experience that they can touch you, which is the worst part
no,
about
they
it.
can't, bro. All right, so come touch me.
You have proof of these things. You have proof of this on your phone?
Yes, of course I do. The f you talking about? If Alex could get a video from the Bohemian Grove, of course I could.
Well, I have to be careful what I say because I'm in the middle of a judicial process right now.
You want me to get you out of it? I can help.
Well, bro, my door gets kicked in if I say what I'm thinking. Tell everyone at home then. Start from the beginning. When did this happen? Where did this happen? What exactly did you see? Why have you tweeted the things you've tweeted? Let people at home understand you a little
Because I don't give a bro. They raped me, right? I was 2 years old. They raped me. I have proof of that too. That's where it all started, bro. At the right time, I'm gonna release all of it. But at the right time, I'm gonna do it. They're already calling me to tell me to stop. I don't give a dude. I've already had a meeting with them. I'm gonna let you sit with that, Andrew.
All right, bro. Well, I want you to know that either way, I'm praying for you, and I hope that.
Thank you, bro.
You know, and I mean.
I don't give a bro. And Alex Jones has been singing the same shit, and they try to can't. The only reason they can't stop me because they listen to the devil. I listen to God. God gave me authority. It's over for everybody, bro.
As you just heard, American professional boxer Ryan Garcia told social media personality Andrew Tate about his experience of when he was tied down at Bohemian Grove and forced to watch kids get sexually assaulted. He claims to have proof about what transpired at the Grove, and even goes on to say that he also has proof of him being sexually assaulted at the age of 2. A question that needs to be asked is why would Ryan go out of his way to bring forth this information if it could damage all of the progress made in his career as well as permanently ruin his reputation? In this next clip with TMZ, Ryan behaves somewhat abnormally when stating that he will stop talking about anything unrelated to his fight.
Here to announce my return back to Instagram. Now, over these past couple days, you guys have seen some pretty intense things. I understand what they are and I don't understand what they look like. But I'm coming back to announce I'm not going to speak on any other topic other than boxing, sports, and my fight.
Strangely, he doesn't quite look nor act like himself, is wearing a bizarre Greco-Roman crown, and seems forced to say certain things during the interview. After the TMZ incident, Ryan started speaking out again and came forward saying that his cards were blocked and that certain authorities tried to put him in jail. His claims that he isn't doing this for any material gain seem justified with the strange things that have transpired after he came forward attempting to expose the human trafficking industry.
Hey guys, it's me, Ryan. I'm coming on here to explain what's going on. I'm not in possession of my phone. I can't get access to my Instagram. My cards are locked. I personally wanted just to send out a video to the people that love me and my fans. I'm okay. I'm not dead. I believe in Jesus. All those are lies. And they try to put me in jail. They're blocking my cards. I can't access my money. I don't know what's going on, but just know I'm okay.
The reason why you will see audience members place hats on him during his live stream is because TikTok is currently the only platform he is able to use to talk about these subject matters to his followers. Here, he provides some statistics about the industry and discusses some hard truths about his current situation.
I'm not doing this for clout. I'm not doing this for anything. This does nothing for my fight. This is just me trying to give the facts and the truth of what I've seen throughout the years. The last fight was for my son, Henry. I wanted to fight for him, and that's what I give the fight to. This time, it's for the children around the world. I'm gonna give you guys some facts, since some people want some facts. This is surface level proof. This is common knowledge if you're really paying attention. Okay, the first fact, with human trafficking, including sex trafficking, the global industry of human trafficking, including child sex trafficking, is estimated to be worth $150 billion annually.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
$150 billion annually. Do you understand what that means? Number two, globally, the International Labor Organization estimates that 1.2 million children are trafficked each year. 1.2 million children are trafficked each year. The U.S. is the #1 nation in the world for consuming child sex material. The rules of satanic worship is it needs to be in your plain sight. That's all I'm going to say. So everything that I'm saying is right in front of your face. And you're not doing anything about it. You're not doing anything about it. I'm screaming to the world, putting my reputation on the line. I got people wanting to cancel the fight. People telling me I need to go to a mental rehab to put me into the psych ward because I'm speaking the truth. Please help me and you help the children. You know, Jeffrey Epstein ain't the only island. Think about that. They do horrible things together so they don't snitch against each other, and they're rich so they hold each other accountable. If you say something, I'm gonna say something, and everything comes down. Think about it. It's insanity for telling the truth now in a world full of lies. Everybody went crazy when I said Bohemian Grove, and I'm not gonna get into that. But it's the truth. And I'm hurt every day because they have tried everything in their power to stop me. And God pulled me through. As you see the rough 3 days I went through, but God brought me out of it. I might cry, I might cry. But it only because of the Holy Spirit and the love that I feel right now. I don't want to cry, but I'm gonna cry. I love God so much, and I just felt that in my heart. I felt that in my soul. Like, I've been going through a lot lately. I've been feeling a lot of hurt because I tried myself. I tried my hardest to share all the love that He gave me, and I tried to help out the kids, and I tried my best, and everybody tried to break me down. You know what I mean? Like, they try to break me down. They try to make me stop. You know, they try to cancel my fight. And I was trying to do something good, you know, and I put everything down on the line. I appreciate it. I love you guys. I want to leave you guys with that peace.
It's amazing to see how he is fighting for a good cause to help protect children of the world, yet people still want to go after him and cancel his fight. Do you think Ryan Garcia is telling the truth? If you still need more evidence on what takes place at Bohemian Grove and its ties to the human trafficking industry, we can look to former head FBI agent of Los Angeles, Ted Gunderson, someone who was silenced for coming forward with some bold claims. Here is a warning to anyone proceeding further into the video that what you are about to hear is quite disturbing and not for the faint of heart. This is your last chance to back out.
This is it. Don't get scared now.
You connect all of the dots and they've got some of the same symbols that go to Baphomet. The Owl of Moloch up here in the Bohemian Grove, they sacrifice children. They do it symbolically now, maybe.
No. I have a source. When he was 12, 13, 14 years old, who was put in a cage at the Bohemian Grove and with another young boy who was part of their network. And they had a third young boy in there who had been kidnapped, and they had to commit sex acts with him, and then they had to murder him on camera. This is called a snuff film. These snuff films sell for $50,000 each.
I knew Sammy Davis Jr. was heavy into that.
Well, Sammy Davis Jr. admitted he was involved in the satanic. This all goes back to satanic cults. And
he was with Anton LaVey, is that correct?
That's right. In Nebraska in the 1980s, I have sources who I've talked to, and they told me they were part of the network. One of them in particular was used as a decoy in parks, public places, shopping malls, to bring children his age, 12, 13, 14 years old, near the car. They'd kidnap the kids. He'd attended auctions where these kids were auctioned off for up to $50,000 each. He's attended 6 auctions, as few as 6, and as many as 36 children were auctioned off for up to $50,000 each, as I said a moment ago. If you go to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children website, last time I checked, there are 91 Americans who disappear every hour, and it is believed 85 to 90% of them are children. Okay? These children, of course, a lot of them are returned because their parents will kidnap and so forth, but a lot of them are not returned.
Theodore L. Gunderson, known as Ted Gunderson, was a Federal Bureau of Investigation special agent in charge and head of the Los Angeles FBI. He was also head of the Memphis FBI office from 1973 to 1975. He worked on cases such as the death of Marilyn Monroe and the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. In this interview, he described that he investigated a source who was put in a cage at Bohemian Grove and forced to partake in a snuff film. The decoy who he mentioned from Nebraska who would lure children in from parks and public places is a man by the name of Paul Bonacci. If we think about these snuff films that Gunderson claims sell for around $50,000 each, we will find that the only people who can afford these films are very wealthy elites. In fact, photographer Russell E. Nelson came forward with information on a well-known celebrity who he believed approached him to shoot a snuff film.
I went to work for somebody in good faith.
Yeah.
And ended up seeing way more than I ever wanted to or dreamed of.
So Hunter Thompson approached you about doing a snuff film?
Yep.
Okay.
He offered me $100,000 to shoot a snuff film, and I wouldn't do it. I did say snuff film. That's where they would actually kill somebody.
Okay.
And have it on film. They would sell the tape to these wealthy business people for tremendous amounts of money.
What is a typical day like for you out there? You still have a home in Colorado, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you do out there? What kind of things going on for you?
I like to kill.
And when you say kill, you're talking about what, neighbors? What?
We don't want to talk about shooting people, do we?
No.
We don't want to talk about shooting people, do we?
No, but you're teasing when you say you like to kill, right?
Yeah. No, I'm not teasing. I used to like to kill. I was hunting because I like to kill.
Yeah.
I wish I brought the damn gun.
Uh-huh.
State-of-the-art killing machine.
Killing machine, yeah.
Well, we don't really care. Those guns are killing machines.
Yeah.
I don't have to use them like that, but it's comforting to know that you can.
We can clearly see that Hunter S. Thompson acted strange toward David Letterman on his late-night show when asked about killing people in the 80s. His prolonged responses and uncomfortability in responding bring much more validity to these snuff film claims. Another source who does not mention Mr. Thompson's name explicitly but seems to have similar ties to him is John Todd. John Todd, originally born as Lance Collins, claimed to be a former witch, satanic high priest, and high-ranking member of the Illuminati. He is said to have been born into a family with deep occult roots, where he was initiated into witchcraft at the age of 14 in Colorado. He served in the U.S. Army and Navy and claimed to have organized numerous witch covens. One of the strangest parts about John Todd is his death, where different records mention that he was murdered in the fall of 1979, murdered in 1994 after being released from false imprisonment, and again murdered in 2007 while staying in a behavioral disorder unit in South Carolina. I bring up these records because the inaccuracy for the date of his death is similar to a cover-up murder case. He also claimed to be in the top 13 elite families of the world as part of the Collins family, and in May of 1971 was said to have become a Grand Druid High Priest put in charge of 13 states in the US. 13 is a big number for the Freemasons, and is seen everywhere across the dollar bill. In August of 1972, he claimed to have seen an Illuminati chart showing their grand agenda. Here are a few things he saw which should raise some eyebrows if you're paying attention to current world news. The first was taking guns away from US citizens. The second was enacting martial law. And the third thing he saw was Israel starting World War III. There are many other things he saw, but we must move on. He eventually found a way to break free from the darkness and became a strong Christian bound with purpose in revealing the Illuminati's plans for humanity. In a snippet from one of his audio tapes, Todd discloses Colorado Senator George McGovern as the man who handed him the knife for his initiation ceremony. George McGovern and Hunter Thompson were good buddies, and I wonder if John Todd's initiation ceremony took place at Thompson's retreat in Aspen, Colorado. Here is the audio snippet.
Initiation of witchcraft blood sacrifice. I studied for 6 more months and then taken up to Colorado Springs and initiated. And I do believe that when I testified here the last time, I explained who the person was that handed me the ceremonial knife for that ceremony. Another senator named George McGovern. You might, before the night gets over, start to realize that Washington isn't bad as you thought it was. It's worse.
I've investigated and exposed an organization in Washington, D.C., known as the Finders. It's an international child kidnapping ring, and these, as I said a few moments ago, these kids sell on the auction block for up to $50,000 each. My source was there, and he was part of the network. He was one of the decoys. He uses a decoy, as I mentioned a few moments ago. So this all dovetails, and you give this to the law enforcement, they laugh at you because they've been infiltrated, very basically. Not every law enforcement agency, I'm sure. There's a lot of good police officers, a lot of good FBI and CIA agents, but it's a fact. Senator or Congressman Kucinich has announced that the CIA has their own assassination squad. What are we doing killing people without due process? What's going on here?
Most people would refuse to believe Ted Gunderson's testimony of people being killed without due process, along with there being an international kidnapping ring in Washington, D.C. But Ted or John aren't the only people who have worked in high spheres of government that are saying this, as we will find out later. Returning to Paul Bonacci, here is another audio snippet where former Nebraskan Senator John DeCamp discloses information from Paul's personal diary. Detailed in it is his direct experience from the snuff film taken on property at Bohemian Grove.
Continuing, you actually have the passages in your book out of the diary, and then.
Well, I have right here the diary. If you want me to read a little, okay? Now, understand that I didn't know that the thing was Bohemian Grove back then, nor did the kid when he was writing it. All he knew was he was taken to this place. Let me just read it. It'll take 3 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
I went in January. Now, this is Bonacci, a kid named Paul Bonacci writing this, and this is directly word for word from his diary. I went in January of '84 on every trip. I was paid by men King knew for sex. In the summer of '84, sometime, I went to Dallas, Texas, and had sex with several men King knew in a hotel. I flew on YNR Airlines. By the way, that's a private airline or just private charter deal. And CAM Airlines, another private charter deal, normally for King. I never had much personally to do with King, only went where he told me to go. In or on July 26th, I went to Sacramento, California. King flew me out on a private plane from Epley Airfield in Omaha to Denver, where we picked up Nicholas, a boy who was about 12 or 13. Then we flew to Vegas, to a desert strip, and drove into Las Vegas into some ranch and got something. Then flew on to Sacramento. We were picked up by a white limo and taken to a hotel. I don't remember the name of it. We, meaning Nicholas and I, were driven to an area that had big trees. It took about an hour to get there. There was a cage with a boy in it who was not wearing anything. Nicholas and I were given these Tarzan things to put around us and stuff like that. They told me to, I won't use the word, blank the boy and stuff. In other words, have sex with him. At first I said no, and they held a gun to my genitals, I'll use the word, and said do it or else lose them or something like that. I began doing it to the boy and stuff. And Nicholas had anal sex and stuff with him. We were told to blank him and stuff and beat on him. I didn't try to hurt him. We were told to put our blanks in his mouth and stuff and sit on the boy's blank and stuff, and they filmed it. We did this stuff to the boy for about 30 minutes or an hour when a man came in and kicked us and stuff in the genitals and picked us up and threw us. He grabbed the boy and started blanking him and stuff. The man was about, I'm not sure how to say it. The man was about so many inches long, and the boy screamed and stuff, and the man was forcing his blank into the boy all the way. The boy was bleeding from his rectum, and the men tossed me and him and stuff and put the boy right next to me and grabbed the gun and blew the boy's head off. The boy's blood was all over me, and I started yelling and crying. The men grabbed Nicholas and I and forced us to lie down. They put the boy on top of Nicholas, who was crying, and they were putting Nicholas' hands on the boy's blank. They put the boy on top of me and did the same thing. They then forced me to blank the dead boy. It's pretty crude. They put a gun to our heads to make us do it. His blood was all over us. They made us kiss the boy's lips and anyway, do other things. Then they made me do something I don't even want to even write, so I won't. After that, the men grabbed Nicholas and drug him off, screaming. They put me up against a tree and put a gun to my head, but fired into the air. I heard another shot from somewhere, and then saw the man who killed the boy drag him like a toy. Everything, including when the men put the boy in a trunk, was filmed. The men took me with them, and we went up in a plane. I saw the bag the boy was in. We went over a very thick brush area with a clearing in it. Over the clearing, they dropped the boy. One said the men with the hoods would take care of the body for them. I didn't see Nicholas until that night at the hotel. He and I hugged and held each other for a long while. About 2 hours later, the men or Larry King came in and told us to go take a shower since we had only been hosed off at some guy's house. We took a shower together and then were told to put on the Tarzan things. After we were cleaned up and dressed in these things, we were told to put on shorts, socks, and a shirt and shoes and driven to a house where the men were at with some others. They had the film and they played it. As the men watched, they passed Nicholas and I around as if we were toys.
As you just heard, this account was taken directly from Paul Bonacci's diary of when he was taken to Bohemian Grove. Over the years during the case, people like Ted Gunderson helped Bonacci identify who his target was, and Paul believes it was Hunter S. Thompson who forced him and Nicholas to participate in a snuff film. Now, you may be needing more evidence before drawing any sort of conclusion. However, there's evidence to confirm Thompson's pleasure in watching snuff films, which only brings forth more confirmation to Bonassi's claims. Nicole Brown, a poet and editorial assistant for Hunter S. Thompson, became a good friend of his until things took a turn for the worse. After Hunter S. Thompson shot himself in the head in 2005, Nicole came forward with an article about her true feelings toward Mr. Thompson. Her reports of him losing his control further prove his acts of violence with his own pet Hugo, which add credit to his psychopathic tendencies. But more than that, something much darker. And I quote, "One time I watched him beat his car because his cigarettes were locked inside. And another time he threw me out of the house for refusing to watch a snuff film. And he was hell on his new kitten Hugo, especially when he felt I was paying it too much attention. He would snatch Hugo up, smudge his pink nose in cocaine, and send him darting across the kitchen floor." End of quote. And even more, the next sentence adds fuel to the fire for his pleasure to torture animals, and maybe even kids. And I quote, "He might have, in his own way, respected animals, but he had no compassion for them. For weeks he played a tape recording of a jackrabbit screaming in a trap." End of quote. Yes, Nicole did mention being locked outside for refusing to watch a snuff film. Maybe it was even one of his own. Maybe, just maybe, it was one starring Paul Bonassi at Bohemian Grove. And she's not the only celebrity who has had encounters with people like this. Take a listen to bass player from the German rock band Scorpions, Ralf Reicherman, and his account of what he saw at a party in Germany.
I went to one time, I've seen really bad.
Was it like a donkey show or?
No, actually, I think they actually kill people there and stuff. They pay like up to like 100,000 people to see people get
executed.
I'm not kidding. But I went to another one where literally I saw like the grossest. I wanted to throw up.
1993, and it's approximately 2 p.m. Paul Bonassi is going to talk to me on tape for the next several hours, I presume. Paul, would you step in here and take your place? Explain to me what multiple personality is. Because you've been a multiple one yourself.
Yeah, multiple personality disorder is a disorder that people get when they've suffered traumatic events, usually when they were young children, usually stemming from sexual abuse or satanic ritual abuse. And it's when a person has two or more personalities living within a body and stuff, or usually it's more than that. And they each have their own lives, and they each, usually they see each other as being a totally different person. But some of them know that they're multiples or that there's other personalities within the same body, but the majority of the personalities do not, and the main personality usually has no awareness of the other personalities at all. Usually he's totally unaware of everything.
Now, you were multiple personality, right?
Yeah.
How many personalities did you have?
Altogether there were about 121 or so.
Did each personality have a name?
Every personality has a name.
And why do people develop these? You said because of traumatic experience, but why would a traumatic experience cause you to develop another personality?
I haven't figured that out myself, but I think it has something to do with the fact that the main personality is unable to cope with it. It's so traumatic that you have to create a system so that the main personality can go on living without having all the problems, because normal people who get abused and stuff that don't create multiples and stuff usually have a lot of emotional problems, have a lot of physical problems and stuff, whereas a multiple usually, the main personality can usually go through life pretty simply, and nobody really notices it until the person starts getting older or switching behavior is so evident that there's not just one person there, that it's like you're dealing with several different people because they just change. Integration means that the personalities are totally gone, that you don't switch off from one personality to another personality, that one personality, usually hopefully it's the main person, all the other personalities integrate with them, and all their memories from all the other personalities go into that one person's memory, and the person learns to live with all of the traumatic events, and just to live in life and stuff without having to switch off to deal with daily events. All the psychiatrists try and say is that once you're multiple personality, you can integrate completely and stuff, but you always have the ability to dissociate into and create a new personality any time that's needed, which I don't know if that's true or not, because there's nothing that, after remembering my past, that anything in the future that could be any more horrible or any worse than what I've already gone through. So I don't feel like there's any need to ever have to switch back into that kind of a mode. And in the integration process and stuff, the personality, usually I can see it inside my head, because inside you have a visual of everybody. It's the other personalities and stuff. And they grow up and they kind of just merge with you. And all of their memories come with them and stuff. There's no longer any need to have that personality, because you already know everything that the personality knows from you talking with them.
And as you answer these questions, this is Paul Benassi answering them, but in the old times, it would have been one of your other personalities. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in the past it would have had to been some of the others, because like when I first started getting interviewed by Gary Caradori and the Omaha police, the other personalities had to come out, because I had no knowledge of any of this stuff at all. I mean, like the police, when they said that Paul Benassi, said that nothing happened, they were probably correct, because they probably actually in fact, I know they got me out one time and stuff, after one of the personalities had talked to me and stuff, and then...
What do you mean they got you out?
They got me as Paul out.
Okay.
During the middle of one of their interviews about some of these people that had abused me and stuff, and the way they got me out and stuff was they kind of scared the other personalities, and I'm usually the one that's kind of the protector of everybody. Because even though I didn't know at the time that these were other personalities, I thought these were their other friends and stuff that I was protecting and stuff. I came out and the cops were sitting there saying, telling me to take back stuff. This didn't really happen, did it? I mean...
That's the way they interviewed you?
Yeah, that's the way they interviewed me. It's like when I was
Who
talking
interviewed
about
you that way?
Detective, or Sergeant Hoke. Detective Hoke.
With what department?
OPD. Omaha Public.
Sounds to me like you did a great job.
Well, he did, and God did a lot of the work. I mean, because I had to go back in my cell. Most of the integration happened when I was on my own and stuff, and I'd go through them and talk to personalities, and they'd be ready to integrate, and they'd integrate, and it was fine. And
so you, through your own strength and your own faith?
Well, it wasn't my faith. It's faith that God gave me, because my own strength, I'd have quit. He gave me a strength that I made it with.
The following interview is from May 14th, 1990, between Paul Benassi and Special Investigator Gary A. Caradori at the Douglas County Correctional Center in Omaha, Nebraska.
Then he came back and he started kicking out of me again. He started kicking my head. I started to do something to him with a stick. Right in my balls, and couldn't fight him back. Then he took me and Nicholas and shoved us in the cage. And he took this kid and he sat there and sat him up. Sat him up? Right next to the cage, and then he... started kicking the kid in his face. The kid was just crying. I kept yelling at the guy selling us, I said, kill him if I got a hold of him. And I said, no, they just shot him. And what? Shot him. Shot him in his head. Right after that, I tried to kill myself. Took us back to the hotel and tried to cut my wrist. Who shot him? Paul? Did you shoot him with a pistol or a rifle? Handgun. Pistol. Where exactly did they shoot him on his And his head, front and behind, different. I was just crying so much after they did that stuff that they opened the case, they grabbed Nicholas and they scared me to death. They took him and they drug him over into the woods and stuff. I heard a couple of shots. I thought they killed him too. They didn't.
They took Nicholas out of the cage? Did they drug him over to where?
Drug him off into some trees or something. I thought they'd shot him, but they didn't. And they said that he came back and one guy came back and Nicholas didn't come back and stuff. I didn't see him until about an hour later. They had him cuffed up. He was scared to death.
What did they do with the body?
I don't know.
Did you see him drag him away?
I saw him pick it up and put it in the car. I saw the car drive away that first time.
What did Larry King do throughout all this?
He was watching it. Smiling.
Smiling? Why didn't you report him?
Scared?
You never told anybody till this day about that?
Told all their friends about it.
Tell the police about it?
Yeah.
Who did you tell in the police?
Detective Hope.
What did he say?
He didn't believe me.
Why?
He says those type of things just don't happen. Just like he says that this type of stuff doesn't happen in Omaha. Omaha is a nice conservative town.
You weren't in Omaha.
I know. He's like everything else in this that I've been told. This type of things don't happen in Omaha. People from Omaha don't do that stuff. Well, that's a bunch of lies.
So what happened after? How much later after the gunshot and the boy was killed did you leave?
3 hours.
Describe the setting for me, please.
It looked like it was a garden. Off to one direction there was a house that was not too far from there that I believe that the producer or somebody lived at. That's where we went after we left there. There was some rocks and big boulders, like cages like set in between it. And all the trees were pretty big. Just a wooded area. And a swing in a little like pond or something down in one of the trails.
Once again, midsummer sets us free.
From more files found on his interviews, we find that the kid Paul was forced to have sex with was named Jeremy. In some of his earlier interviews, Paul described seeing a big owl statue and men wearing hoods in the middle of the forest where the snuff film took place. However, mostly everyone interviewing him thought this was a false memory of his and discounted it. They knew nothing about Bohemian Grove at the time, So when claims about the owl statue started surfacing from other investigators, this only boosted the validity of his claims. Former Nebraskan Senator John DeCamp wrote in his book, The Franklin Cover-Up, that Paul was taken to a wooded area which was later identified after the first publication of the book as Bohemian Grove. This is one of the reasons why he republished the book with 2 parts 4 years later after its initial release. In this account, if we read further down the next page, we see that Paul identifies Mr. Thompson as the director of the film. What's even more interesting are the ties between Bohemian Grove and Hunter S. Thompson's cabin in Colorado. His retreat where Nicola had her strange encounters with him, and possibly where John Todd may have been initiated into witchcraft, is literally called Owl Farm. Make with that what you will. A documentary that never aired and highlighted the events of the Franklin cover-up, especially those surrounding Paul Benassi and Lawrence King, is called The Conspiracy of Silence. This film was funded by the Discovery Channel for a series of videos called First Tuesday back in 1993. Just before the documentary was supposed to air publicly, the Discovery Channel withdrew all of their support for the project. To this day, the full documentary has remained unaired.
This is the true story of Lawrence King. It is the story of an evil at the heart of America, of a cover-up at the highest level. One man is attempting to uncover the full story. John DeCamp is among the most highly decorated Vietnam veterans. A former Republican state senator in Lincoln, Nebraska, he is now a lawyer fighting the legacy of Lawrence King's evil network.
It's a web of intrigue that starts in our Holy of Holies, Boys Town, Nebraska, one of the most respected institutions in the United States, and spreads out like a spider web to Washington, D.C., right up to the steps of the nation's capital, the steps of the White House, involves some of the most respected and powerful and richest businessmen in this United States of America. And the centerpiece of the entire web is the use of children for sex and drug dealing and drug couriers, the compromising of politicians, the compromising of businessmen, but worst of all, the corruption of key institutions of government that have the duty and responsibility to make sure these things never happen. Boys Town, for me, was the first thing I ever heard of when you think of institutions that you respect. Believe it or not, I was there for a while when I was a young boy. Probably worldwide, there's no institution other than Boys Town that has done so much good for so many children over such a long period of time so successfully. When an institution like that gets contaminated, purposes of abusing children instead of protecting children, then you better, if you've got any decency at all, do something about it or at least get it cleared up.
John DeCamp lays the blame for the contamination of Boys Town on the one-time leader of the National Black Republican Council, Larry King.
Larry King was the fastest rising black star in the entire Republican Party of the United States during all of the 1980s. And he was also one of the most evil individuals in this country in terms of being a dealer of children, in terms of being a thief, 40 million that they documented he stole, and in terms of using and compromising and corrupting one after another politician.
The base for his network was a small People's Bank in Omaha, Nebraska, the Franklin Federal Credit Union. Larry King was its general manager. King courted the leaders of Omaha's wealthy business district. Banks, industry, and charities placed millions of dollars in King's hands. From 1979, Larry King developed close commercial ties to Boys Town, and Boys Town youngsters were sent to work for his companies. King used Boys Town as a source of young boys for his business and for sex and drug orgies. Paul Benassi was a victim of King's abuse. He was also sent by King to lure Boys Town youngsters off campus.
We used to just drive around and go up to what a home that someone used to do some of the scavenger hunts with picking up some of the kids. You know, just kind of win their confidence, become friends with them for a while. Start inviting them to the parties. The kids were 10 years old or older.
In 1986, King's plundering of Boys Town was reported by staff to the chief executive, Father Val Peter. Despite the investigation, Larry King remained free to feed his pedophilic parties with child victims. But in 1988, a routine review brought the Boys Town cases to the attention of Nebraska's State Foster Care Review Board.
And the information presented to the Foster Care Review Board, either via the telephone reports, the personal reports, or the reports we reviewed, Larry King's name was consistently present as someone that the youth were making allegations against. I mean, I turned that information over to authorities, and nothing happened. I would say we handed over at least a foot-high amount of material. Generally speaking, the allegations were ignored.
Omaha police now accept that Larry King may have been abusing children. Those perpetrators named by the children formed a ring of rich and powerful pedophiles in Omaha. Men from industry, politics, the media, even the police. Besides Larry King, ringleaders were department store billionaire Alan Baer and the celebrity columnist of the Omaha World Herald newspaper, Peter Citron. Larry King's political and business empire grew. He courted the Republican Party nationally and plundered Franklin's accounts to finance a luxury lifestyle of limousines, private planes and palatial homes, 3 in Omaha and 1 in Washington, D.C. Franklin's records show he spent $10 million on jewelry, flowers and private planes. And his lavish spending bought him a charmed life.
Larry King was constantly heralded, cheered, applauded in the news media as the great businessman that's helping the poor people, the black community of Omaha.
But King's extravagance attracted the attention of the Internal Revenue Service. As a result, on April the 11th, 1988, the Franklin Credit Union was raided and closed by the FBI. King was arrested, and a federal investigation showed he'd stolen $40 million from Franklin. But the FBI's inquiries were secret, and evidence of King's sex ring was quickly covered up.
I received a phone call on the floor of the legislature. The caller did not identify himself, but he said, "Lauren, you do not want to have an investigation of the Franklin Federal Credit Union." And I asked who I was speaking to, and they said, "That doesn't matter, but you shouldn't have that investigation." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "It will reach to the highest levels of the Republican Party, and we're both good Republicans."
The night before we testified before the legislative committee, I did receive a phone call at home that said, "If you speak, you won't live to regret it."
Ormiston and Caradori recorded their new witnesses on videotape. A victim of abuse since he was 8, Paul Benassi was present at many of Larry King's sex parties.
Media personality Peter Citron procured some of his victims from Boys Town.
The kids he liked were mainly around the age of probably about 8 and 13. It was mainly fondling and oral sex with him. He did have some anal sex, but he usually did that with the older kids.
Alan Baer was a sick. Didn't care, wanted sex, nasty, I don't even know if you can call it sex, and take it any way he can get it, pay for it, he liked to, but if he had to take it by force, he would. Larry King was the same kind of sick Alan Baer was, except Larry King was more violent, more sure of himself, I mean, I would, see him a 10-year-old boy in the ass, until he bled, and, just pull out and stop, and, push him down, and then go out and, meet with decent people.
King would also provide underage girls for abuse. Alicia Owen was 15 when she attended her first party. Alan Baer and Larry King frequently hosted the child sex parties in penthouse apartments at the Twin Towers luxury block.
A lot of it was me handcuffed with my hands behind my head and my feet tied, and they're doing different things.
What do you mean?
Sometimes there'd be a guy straddling over my face.
Okay.
Most of the time, Larry King took pictures quite a bit during that time.
I know it's difficult.
I don't know.
Okay. And you know, Alicia, you're a victim. And with the young age, let's go off camera for a minute.
We were appalled. Appalled. It was incredible. It's incredible what these kids went through, I think.
I was shocked when I walked in. There was a kid, I would say about 15 years old, out in the middle of the room. One guy was standing in front of him. He was bent over, and the other guy was like reaching under him, playing with his nipples, while a guy whom Jeff told me was a police officer shoving beads up his rectum.
The police officer was shoving beads up his rectum?
Yes.
Those of us that didn't like to be involved and didn't want to be involved were threatened.
And who would do these threatening remarks?
Larry King.
Do you think Larry King personally did?
I think he did. And when they threatened, that I can go find somebody that will kill you, and it will kill your family.
Drugs was a strong part of how they got control of some of the kids, because that's what some of the kids were there to get. They would do the sexual acts and then be provided with cocaine or whatever type of drug they wanted.
Heroin, I don't know, but that was my drug of choice, Till this day, I remain an addict,
Larry King was, I would say, the center of transporting the children around the country. The airplanes were usually in his name, at least in his name. They were paid for by Larry King.
4 years on, Boys Town remains unwilling to discuss its involvement with Larry King. We asked for an interview with Chief Executive Father Val Peter, but Boys Town's public affairs officer refused.
I would have to give you a flat no. I'm just going to tell you at this point that we will not participate with you. We have no interest in talking to you folks. It's something that we don't even care to delve into.
Hi.
Hi, is Father Val Peter available, please?
You can check in his office. It's the first one on the...
Thank you very much. We're here because we have to give Father Val Peter and Boys Town every opportunity to talk to us about the very serious allegations.
Please turn your recorder off. Please step outside.
Why is it that Boys Town is unwilling to discuss your relationship with Larry King?
We don't have a relationship with Larry.
I'm afraid papers that we possess show that Boys Town had a relationship with Larry King.
I just suggest you be very careful about what you report. Excuse me.
Unless you... I've heard that people said that Gary Caradori coached me and that he told me what to say, but the fact was I didn't meet Gary Caradori until way after I'd already talked to the Omaha police about the abuse and had named all the same people. And they didn't ask me very much about Larry King or even Alan Baer at all. They treated the allegations that I made about the people who abused me almost like a joke.
The FBI's attitude was, just no, that these kind of things don't happen. From the first interview when I went, and realized they don't believe a thing I'm saying, they were just appalled, but I realized what that look in their eye was back then. It was fear. It was fear of, I had witnessed you know, firsthand things that would, you know, destroy this city, you know, people, a position, you know what I mean? It's not going to be believed, they said. It will not be believed. You will be found guilty of perjury, and you, I mean, they weren't telling me maybe. You know, they were saying, there's no way. You go on with this story, you're going to jail. I mean, that was said to me direct.
You literally have to have bricks for brains to take on the FBI in this country. And that's exactly what you'd have to do this properly. They now, in my opinion, in my investigation, are the architects of the cover-up.
We asked the FBI for an interview about its investigation of the Franklin scandal.
Larry Holmquist with the FBI here. We feel it would be inappropriate for us to comment. We work this with the Omaha Police Department. We just don't feel it would be appropriate for us to make comments.
Gary was threatened several times. His vehicles were tampered with. I would think whoever tampered with them, it was a scare tactic because it was so obvious that they were being tampered with.
Gary he was one piece of evidence I know he got. He even said he got one step ahead of him this time. He told us about this book. It was like addresses, telephone numbers, names. He said if they knew he had it, they'd kill him.
On July the 11th, 1990, Gary Caradori and his 8-year-old son, AJ, were flying home from Chicago. They had watched the All-Stars baseball game, and Caradori had been pursuing new leads.
Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are in Harold Cameron's cornfield trying to determine what caused this private plane to crash, killing its 2 occupants.
The bodies of Gary Caradori and 8-year-old AJ were found in the wreckage.
National Transportation Safety Board investigators say wreckage from the crash is apparently strewn over a 3/4 to 1 mile long stretch in this field.
The federal investigation was never able to discover what tore the plane apart.
There are things missing from the plane. His briefcase is missing.
Within 24 hours of the tragedy, FBI agents impounded all records of the investigation.
Let alone my husband. But I think if you'd ever talk to any parent, be it mother or father, who's ever lost a child, I mean, the worst thing that you can think of is that somebody would want to murder a child.
I really feel that somebody killed my brother. Inside me, I know that somebody killed my brother. If somebody could help us out somewhere, somebody knows something.
Troy Bonner was to be the star witness against Alicia Owen, but he grew uneasy about maintaining what he claims were the lies fed to him by the FBI. But when his brother Sean died in an inexplicable gun accident, Troy and his family were convinced they'd been sent a warning message.
You know, and they killed him just flat out, right? Somehow, professionally, made something happen, you know, to shut me up.
The purpose of Sean's death? To instill fear. And it worked.
Do I feel guilty about my brother? Yes, I do. That's where all this is coming from. This is where the energy is coming from, that I'm getting to do this. Is for him, because, I mean, it should have been me there instead of him. Really. I mean, I'm not trying to make anybody feel bad, but I mean, he was brilliant and you know, innocent. You know, it should have been me. I mean, he had so much to give. I've taken so much. You know, it should have been the other way around.
I can explain to you what it feels like to lose a child. But when you see the pain your kids have because of that, it's much worse. I can't do anything for him. I can't take that pain away for him.
It has shaken my faith in the institutions of government. I used to be a firm believer that the system would work, and that people who did things wrong would be punished. And we discovered victims who claimed to have been abused and who the grand jury acknowledged had been abused. But they did not try to find out who had abused those individuals. Instead, they convicted Alicia Owen of perjury, indefensible from my point of view.
In July 1991, Alicia Owen was convicted of perjury. Her sentence was between 9 and 25 years.
I can't find a case in the history of this country where some kid got sentenced to 25 or 30 years in prison for something like this. If you were going to pick a what I call a tell sign, something that says something special about the whole thing, it was in the sentencing itself. For some reason, they had to send a signal to every kid who was a potential witness. My opinion again. A signal so loud and clear, if you dare to come forward, if you dare to talk, watch what happens.
3 months later, Larry King was jailed for the $40 million fraud. He was given a 15-year sentence, 10 years less than Alicia Owen. John DeCamp is now the only man fighting to help Larry King's victims. He's become the lawyer for Paul Bonacci and Alicia Owen.
I live in Nebraska. Hell, I was born here, raised here. I have 4 kids growing up here. Like it or not, it's my heritage, you know. Well, if it's a dirty cesspool that I got to live in or look back on that I left, that ain't good. The real cost, if I were going to say to my family, has been the fear and intimidation it's put in some of the kids. A couple of the kids are really, really frightened and really had some sleeping problems over it, you know, hear this or that. So that's been the real concern I've had.
In the face of mysterious threats, John has turned for advice to his friend and one-time boss, former head of the CIA, Bill Colby.
Old Bill Colby told me better than anything. The one thing that the bad people can't afford is publicity, and knocking you off right now or doing something obvious to one of your kids would bring them more trouble than it's worth.
I said, you have to consider the possibility of some danger to not only your reputation, but to your person. I mean, people do react rather violently to some kinds of charges, or particularly if they're true, there's more apt to be a negative reaction than if they're false. If they're false charges, then they can be reacted to in a normal way, by a libel suit or whatever. But if there's truth in it, there can be a danger in that situation. We've seen that happen in other cases.
Obviously, the FBI was protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of old pedophiles having improper relations with little boys. They were protecting something a lot more significant than a bunch of drug peddlers. They were protecting, in my opinion, they were protecting some very prominent politicians, some very powerful and wealthy individuals associated with those politicians and the political system, up to and including the highest political people in this entire country.
In search of answers, John DeCamp goes to Washington to investigate Larry King's powerful connections in the nation's capital. Paul Bonacci has come too. Larry King threw child sex parties at his $5,000 a month Washington house. Paul Bonacci was one of the victims.
Larry King's house down in Washington, D.C. was a nice house. It was on what I believe it was Embassy Row, because that's what they kept talking about. There were a lot of flags from different countries when you drove around in the area.
So tell me, Paul, how often did you come here?
I was about 14, about 1981, and at first it was about 3 or 4 times the first year. After that, it was about once a month after 81.
And who brought you here?
Larry King brought me here.
And this is the actual house where you...
Yes.
And what, you were used for sex there?
Yes. Some of the parties, when they started off, were straight political type parties with no sex. And then when some of the men had left, some of the politicians had left, the ones that had planned on engaging in some type of sexual activity, that would come after the party. Some of the kids would be held downstairs in some of the rooms where if they acted up or if they started freaking out because of the drugs that they were on, they'd put them in a room that they couldn't get out of, and they'd lock them in.
Were there drugs at these parties?
Yes.
What kind of drugs?
Anything you wanted. Cocaine, heroin, speedballs.
You're telling me those things were at these parties where you had Larry King and prominent politicians?
Yes.
Were they readily available to anybody at the party?
At the after parties, they were readily available for anybody. Beforehand, they did it more upstairs than they did anywhere else, and it was kind of in the back rooms.
Were any attempts ever made that you know of to expose this situation?
As far as I know, nothing's ever been done, and most of the people that were in there had already been, I guess you say, compromised.
King's partner in sex crime was powerful Washington lobbyist Craig Spence. He took youngsters like Benassi on midnight tours of the White House.
So you were in the White House then?
Yes.
And how did you gain access?
Well, I came down with Larry King, but Craig Spence was the one that arranged the trip for us. And it was kind of a gift for our services that we were doing.
How many times were you on this kind of a trip?
I came to it on 2 times.
2 times. And were you used for sex on those occasions?
Not until after we left.
After you left the White House?
Yes.
What time of night?
It was usually around midnight. For me, it was just kind of weird being in the White House at that time of the night, getting to go into places that the guy was telling us that nobody gets to go to. I mean, I seen rooms in there that I'd never even heard about. And Craig Spence and Larry King had a couple of groups. One was called Bodies by God, and they had the Cowboys, and there was another group that was started by Larry King, which was called the Golden Boys, which was kids that were usually under the age of approximately 10.
On the trail of Craig Spence, DeCamp finds the investigative reporter who exposed Spence's callboy network, Paul Rodriguez of the Washington Times.
This was the thing that always bothered me. They claimed it was the largest male prostitution ring in the city that they've ever had uncovered. It was $1 million a year minimum.
Yeah.
And yet they only prosecuted the operator, Henry Vinson, and 3 of his lieutenants, as it were. Mm-hmm. They never went after any of the Johns or the clients. This operation, which was, again, quite large, claimed to have clients that ran from the White House to the Capitol Hill to the State House to the churches, within the media.
And that's precisely what Paul describes as the people he was with.
And a lot of the stuff led there, but we couldn't quite nail it at all cases because, again, to accuse someone of high stature, you've got to be very careful.
I understand.
We were able to do it through the mother lode, which provided us credit card receipts and canceled checks, and then lists of the clients. The prosecutors knew all this stuff. There was approximately 20,000 pieces of 20,000 documents that they had. They sealed the entire record when they found out I was accessing it. They required consent agreements from all the lawyers, all the clients, all the relatives of all the clients, all the hookers, including the clients.
If you can control about 3 or 4 key elements, you can totally own a state. You can make right wrong. You can make truth falsehood, falsehood truth. If you control the media, if you control the Justice Department, if you control the police, you own the system.
It's beyond belief that arguably the most powerful person in the world, the President of the United States, in the form of Richard Nixon, could not prevent the investigation of Watergate, or that President Reagan could not prevent the investigation of Iran-Contra. And yet somehow this group of unnamed, unknown, anonymous individuals in Omaha, Nebraska have such power they can control and protect all of these people from being investigated. Those allegations are ridiculous.
Well, first of all, Nixon did cover up Watergate, number 1. Bush did cover up Iran-Contra, at least officially. And Omaha has successfully covered up this situation. In each case, it was the press that exposed the problem. It wasn't institutions of government. They had been corrupted. They had been compromised. They were the ones doing the cover-up.
The perfect getaway for the world's rich and powerful. And in fact, every year, CEOs, media moguls, and high-level politicians flock here to the Bohemian Grove's secluded campout.
What you are about to watch is a clip of a woman speaking out in front of Bohemian Grove. She worked at the food court for several years before she spoke out about the things she had overheard and witnessed. In the video, she clearly seems uneasy expressing her concerns. Do you think she's lying? You be the judge.
I worked here for 11 years and educated myself.
What do they think of us?
Well,
expendable fodder units is what they're
the truth is, when you're quiet and you listen, you learn. And around these people, the quieter you are, the more you learn. And when you're a semi-intelligent person with integrity, you know when you're being taken, but you're quiet and you listen, you keep your enemies close. That's right. Man, I got to tell you, though, that the sheriff department's going to know me, okay? Okay, so I knew about the cloning of sheep before it happened, years. I knew about HIV and mosquitoes years before they knew about. Why'd they tell because the old men, they get freaked out and they have these big conferences with the head, health people of the world. I was friends with the paramedics. But I'm really happy this day has come. I've been wanting it for a really long time. I could tell you that they refer to everybody outside the club as little men. Every single man is a little man unless you're in this club. They are the brainstorm of everything that happens. They are the movers, the shakers. They are, when you say it's not a conspiracy, it is. It's really creepy. This used to be considered the armpit of Sonoma County. This is where they kept all the drug addicts. And Starlit Hill is actually called Heroin Hill. Everyone was kept here. Look, I'll tell you this. The small town politics of Sonoma County are totally corrupted by the Bohemian Grove. And it's actually big. It's Napa County. I've met quite a few of these people. The prostitutes, who cares about that? That's sex. But I can tell you this, that every sheriff you see is bought out. They have no integrity. Doesn't matter if you know them on the street and they're nice and they smile at you. When it comes around Bohemian Club, everyone's bought out. These kids that are coming in with red shirts are Sonora, they're just little brats, snot-nosed brats. Sorry. They're coming in because they think someday they're going to be big, and they're not. Well, we all are. There's no one free here. We're all slaves.
These kids, what are they doing there right now?
Well, I mean, I saw Nixon before he died. I've seen them all. They all have to come down to the food court. That's where women are allowed to serve. Except at Northwood, we're allowed to serve if you want, Women? Yeah, yeah. Men too. There's men, there's prostitutes here, and there's boys, hot boys. But the main thing is, above all the sex and all that, it's the main objective of controlling the world. And it all happens here. And the police, oh God, someone know me.
You can do it. Waiting for this.
The world's watching. They're all bought out and they have no integrity, and shame on them, but I understand they got kids too. We all do, We all do. I do too. I mean, my mom's house is to be torn down in January 1st. So I'm taking a huge risk here. It doesn't, that's not the point. There's underage prostitute. It's always been going on. That's not the point. The point is the big picture, and that's the big news. The banks that got built, everything's been decided here. So I'm really, really glad that people are taking action, and I hope people will reach out and kids will have some integrity and walk out. I didn't, but I learned. I learned a lot. And
you're here today.
I'm here today, and I'm passing it on, and sometimes silence is knowledge. And that's why I'm here right now.
And you're silent no more.
No, I'm not silent anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
A common theme you will see between these people who have tried to bring about awareness of these issues is that the police are bought out, just like she says in this clip. Even when Paul Benassi approached the police with his claims, They called him crazy and wouldn't even look into his case. In fact, a large group of police officers are Freemasons. They even have their own section called the Fraternal Order of Police, consisting of around 325,000 members. Now, let's get a better look at the Alex Jones documentary, where he snuck in back in the year 2000. As crazy as the media paints him out to be, he was definitely onto something with Bohemian Grove.
One of the Sonoma County Sheriff's deputies showed up and began asking us why we were filming. We calmly told him we were just sightseeing as members of the Bohemian Club. The point that has to be made here, though, is they do have hidden cameras. After escaping the Sheriff's Department, Mike and I traveled high into the hills to wait until dark and the beginning of the cremation of care ceremony. Before the cremation of care, all the Bohemian Club members begin a massive feast of revelry.
He's so pissed off at
After the feast, cult members travel from the main dining area under the trees out to the eastern side of the lake.
Be gone! Once more, he vanished the scene. Be gone, dull care! Fire shall have its will of thee. Be gone, dull care! And all the winds make merry with thy ducks. Hail, fellowship's eternal flame! Once again, midsummer sets us free.
There had to be, in my belief, an occultist, a deep occultist, who designed each of the elements of this ceremony. It wasn't just a bunch of guys sit together at a bar and said, hey, let's have a good time, the cremation of care, and why don't we do this or that. I believe it was purposely designed, each element in its turn, for what they did.
Now there you see the funeral pyre burning with the effigy of a human, or it could be real, ladies and gentlemen. There's been a lot of strange going-ons in that area of Northern California, but this is what the establishment is into right here in America, the cremation of care. And this was July 15th, 2000.
Bohemian Grove. I made it. I actually made it.
At the end of 2023, a YouTuber by the name of Dancer snuck into the Grove, crossing the Russian River by a kayak. He used a frying pan as his oar. Somehow, he wasn't caught during his infiltration of the Grove. Here, he gives us a better look at the owl statue and altar, which don't seem too well kept. I'm sure there were other sites in use at the time of this video that we are currently unaware of, probably on a remote island or in the middle of the woods somewhere hidden away from civilization.
Yeah, this is the owl statue. What the? No way. This is f***ing cool. Oh, that's hollow. They need to fill this pond up. They do. Yeah, that's the owl A bunch of ferns have grown on it. Well, this is what I wanted to see. Oh, no way. You can go like behind the owl. I got some outlets.
In this video, he walks into one of the cabins and sees a strange druidic statue in the corner. One of the posters resting on the side wall says, "Kidnapped." Not sure if that has any significance, but some people have come forward saying that children have been kidnapped and taken to the grove for human sacrifice rituals. After this video, Dancer snuck into the Bohemian Grove again at the beginning of 2024 in a Part 2 infiltration. He was able to search further on the private grounds. He found some other posters, one of which implies something much darker. The Bohemian Christmas poster shows little children guarded by the owl, but what's most suspicious is the statement at the bottom which says, and I quote, "Come as children, little children," end quote. Could this imply to there being children at the grove? Why would this be advertised at an all-men's encampment? However, this is probably referring to the origins of Bohemian Grove, as what is stated at the top in bold is the word Bohemia, referring to Christmas in the German region where the owl symbolism originated with the Schlaraffia Society. Further on in the video, he had to run to escape security. And making it out without facing security, Dancer released a video shortly after Part 2 saying that he was being followed. It could be due to the fact that he infiltrated Bohemian Grove twice, or that he peed directly on the owl.
Recently it has come to my attention that I might be getting tracked or watched or both, and it's a bit concerning. So I think it's important for me to say this again, especially with all the news going on with the Boeing whistleblower who recently got taken care of, so to speak. I'm not suicidal, and I would never KMS. I think I move too frequently with too much distance that it would be hard for somebody to harm me, but not impossible. And I think I could be a threat to, you know, these higher ups' agenda. So I think that they might want to have a word with me or try to take care of me. And I just wanted to put this out there before anything does happen, if it does.
What you are about to watch is a clip where ambushed journalists ask questions about Bohemian Grove to one of the attendees, former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson. As you watch, pay attention to the way he ignores the journalists and makes them seem like they are invisible. David Gergen, who was much more verbal toward Alex Jones, clearly didn't want to say anything. But Richardson straight up lies to the journalists and walks away. Of course, that shouldn't raise any questions, right?
Yes, sir. First question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You gave a keynote speech at the Bohemian Grove Club, sir. A club which openly has mock child sacrifices and satanic worship, sir. Can you answer my question, sir, please?
I was very pleased. I was very pleased with my performance in the debate. It was a good debate.
What about the Bohemian Grove Club, though, sir? That's very important. They do mock human sacrifices there, sir, and you reported being there.
I was very pleased with my performance in the debate.
Sir, why did you ignore my question, sir? Can we have an open dialogue? If you want to be president, let's have an open dialogue about this. You just ignored me, sir. It's not nice. It's not.
It's running up a storm about that Bohemian Grove over there. Human sacrifices and male prostitutes shipped in there yearly. I sure like to know what goes on over there.
That's respectable stuff.
I know, isn't it? It's disgusting.
What you're doing is not respectable.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about what the governor does over there yearly at Bohemian Grove.
This is about the debate. This is not an open news conference.
Right. Well, with the governor, there's never an open news conference. He talks about AIDS and health care and the same stuff over and over. Governor, Bohemian Grove, actually, you said before that did you or did you not attend Bohemian Grove in San Francisco?
Just one last question. Last time we talked, you were kind of like setting up a storm when I brought up the Bohemian Grove. Why is that?
The what?
The Bohemian Grove. Nothing.
It's me.
Peter, you've witnessed children being sacrificed at the Grove?
You know, I did. And I've made this very public. It is revolving around the case of the missing child case of Kevin Collins. And if anybody looks it up on the internet, they still say that it's an unsolved case. I've been to law enforcement in San Francisco. I made a mention of this for the first time back in 2003 while I was still in jail for another issue. And I thought I would be on death row. I, myself, Peter Alexander Cherneff, am one of 3 people that have witnessed ritualistic murders of children during the 80s up here. The other one is David Scherter, and the third person is Paul Bonacci, who was made well known in the book by Senator John DeCamp, The Franklin Cover-Up. I can tell you from past experience and what I know from other sources, also firsthand, is they go way out of their way to dispose of bodies. Well, the cremation of care, what it is, really, it's a discussion regarding population control. They're making decisions as to what group of millions of people they're going to genocide next. And we all have seen the genocides over the last 10, 15 years for anybody that's paying even a modicum of attention. At the Bohemian Grove, I was involved in a rather private ritual, Catholic, Nazi, satanic in nature, a service, a working, if you will, with 9 relative unknowns at the time, so to speak. A most unique killing ritual table with 9 retractable, long, thin, sharp knives. Blades.
Midsummer sets us free. You burn me once again.
Young Catholic Kevin Collins, snatched off the streets of San Francisco, was sacrificed. As he lay on the table, the knives were brought up through him. And after this, each participant, buoyed by the others, rose to prominence. Leaders of the minions, princes unto Mammon. I called it 9 knights, 9 arms, 9 blades. The participants, except for 1 or 2 I didn't mention, are Willie Brown, Arlen Specter, Barney Frank, Roger Mahoney, the L.A. Cardinal, Ratzinger, who's now the Pope, Robert Byrd, George Bush Sr., otherwise known as George Scherff, S-C-H-E-R-F-F.
You mean Magog? That's what they call him, the man who wages war against God in the final days of earth.
Yes, and Warren Buffett, and the Master of Ceremonies was Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino.
So they are involved in ritual murders, satanic, Luciferian.
They definitely have these during the 80s. I can't attest to what's going on there now. I believe that most of their work was, in certain arenas, was done at that time and prior.
Something interesting to note about Michael Aquino is that he was the founder of the Temple of Set, an overtly satanic organization. He has professed himself as a Satanist and was the Lieutenant Colonel of Psychological Operations in the U.S. Army. He retired back in 1994. In 1988, American journalist and attorney Geraldo Rivera brought Aquino as well as the LaVeys onto his show, Exposing Satan's Underground. Here's what he brought up about Michael Aquino.
Once again, a warning about some tough language and descriptions in a report that we'll have for you in just a moment. Dr. Aquino, the high priest of the Church of Set.
Temple of Set.
Temple of Set, also a colonel, interestingly enough, in the United States Army. What is it, this Satanism?
I think that there is some confusion tonight because this same term means something different to Satanists than it does to Christians in the United States. By our own standards, the people who you've shown in these film clips would not be Satanists, either present or in the past. Rather, they would be the failures of a conventional religion.
I appreciate your opinion. What is it, sir, then? What is Satanism?
Well, originally the Church of Satan, when it was founded, was composed not of people with a hatred for Christianity, but of people who, by and large, were agnostics and atheists, because they felt that the institutions which had arisen around Christianity had failed in their moral commitment. So Satanism itself became an emphasis on rational self-interest and on taking responsibility for your own intellectual and ethical decisions.
Rational self-interest, you call it?
Yes.
Is it not a fact that a 3.5-year-old girl identified you as the alleged perpetrator of molestation?
No, as a matter of fact, it is not the case. An accusation was made by her stepfather, who was an Army chaplain, speaking on behalf of this child. In her original interview with the FBI, she denied ever being molested.
Well, I've seen you are innocent until proven guilty. You were never charged in this case. I don't want to belabor the point. I have seen, however, the affidavits for the search warrant of your home, and they indicate the child is speaking to the authorities, not her father.
This was after she had been subjected to therapy.
Let's say you are innocent of that. You are no longer at the Presidio. You are now in St. Louis, but you are still a serving officer or colonel in the United States Army. Do you feel it is inconsistent with a high-ranking officer pledged, sworn, to uphold the Constitution of the United States that you are also a practicing Satanist?
Not in the least. The Army has known of my religion for the last 20 years. There has never been a problem with it, any more than there's a problem with other members of minority religions.
But let me read from the Satanic Bible. Quote, this is the number one, commandment. Death to the weakling, wealth to the strong. How can you believe this and still uphold the Constitution of the United States? Death to the weakling?
Well, for one thing, what you're looking at there is a highly polemical book that was never meant to be taken literally in all of its commandments.
Father.
Yes, and I'm aware of that, and I'm also saying that members of the Church of Satan understood that much of this book was in the form of a polemic. It was a statement that was dramatically made, but was not intended to be taken literally in all its respects.
So we should not take this book literally?
Correct.
This is Dr. Walter Grote, would you stand, sir? Whose daughter was allegedly abused at West Point, the United States Military Academy. You were a captain in the United States Army. Aside from what allegedly happened to your daughter, which I know you allege was part of a satanic cult, and having nothing to do with this man, I state again for the record, what is your feeling, sir, on the fact that a serving officer in the United States Army is also a professed Satanist, a high-ranking person?
Well, I think in this election year, we've heard a lot about values, Geraldo. We've heard a lot that our little children should be saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Mr. Aquino has identified himself as an antichrist. He preaches that as the leader of the Temple Set. I don't think I'm misquoting him. I find it inconceivable that we can have candidates talking about one nation under God and having our children say that, yet by the same token, we can have somebody in our Army as a colonel leading our troops in battle who are opposed to the very concept of God and whose whole purpose it is to fight against God.
Now, Dr. Walter Grote was true in what he said, that people like Aquino aim to make war against God. Interesting how an Army chaplain would make an accusation toward Aquino for child molestation with his 3.5-year-old stepdaughter. Even more interesting is that Aquino lived in the San Francisco area on the Presidio of San Francisco Army Post, not too far from Bohemian Grove. I wonder what the Temple of Set was doing in the San Francisco area, what kind of sacrificial offerings they were partaking in to their god, Satan.
Satan soldiers are also high-ranking officers in the United States military. Here at San Francisco's Presidio Army Base, for example, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino led a double life as a satanic high priest. The colonel's cult is listed in the San Francisco telephone book, and his phone answering machine boasts of his affiliation.
This is the Temple of Set. The temple is the only international satanic religious institution fully recognized by the United States government.
Indeed, the Army does officially recognize Satanism as a legitimate religion and supplies chaplains with this guide for ministering to the satanic soldier. Yet unofficially, some charge that Army bases have become sanctuaries for devil worshippers. Just last month, under a full moon, I took a midnight tour of the Presidio grounds with police investigator Ed Abanovsky. Are you saying that there was a satanic cult active right here on the Army base?
Yes, we believe so. There's evidence to substantiate that. They had satanic rituals going on. There's an altar in there, and all of the graffiti on the wall would indicate that.
Let's see what I can see. How'd you find this place?
This is a fortification during World War II. During World War II, where they had gun batteries.
I can see a pentagram painted on the wall. I can see the words Prince of Darkness. On this wall, I see several inverted crosses and other obvious satanic ritualistic paintings or symbols. Joseph, we've agreed to conceal your identity, but you are an officer in the United States Army.
That's correct.
And you were an officer in the United States Army during the time you were a member of this satanic organization.
Yes.
Did the authorities at the Presidio know that a satanic organization was active on their base during the time that you were a member?
They were very much aware of it, yes.
Satanism may be a constitutionally protected religion, but similar to another recent case at the United States Military Academy at West Point, here charges surface connecting ritual child abuse at the Presidio Daycare Center to the devil cult. It was here, parents and others allege, that as many as 60 young children were ritualistically abused by soldiers of Satan. What actually was done to the kids?
Oral copulation, sodomy, defecation. They were urinated on.
The former chief juvenile investigator at the Presidio, Ed Abanovsky, is here. He's now a deputy sheriff in Santa Clara County.
Yes, Geraldo stated that as many as 60 kids at the daycare center on base were SRA victims. If Aquino and other members were partaking in these terrible acts with children, clearly Peter Alexander Chernoff's claims about Kevin Collins seem more compelling, especially since he says that Michael Aquino was the master of ceremonies. But in this next clip, things take an unexpected turn.
You witnessed the sacrifice of an individual in a satanic ritual at the Bohemian Grove, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, it was Kevin Collins. And I've also made this very public that I was one of 3 or 4 people that kidnapped him off the streets of San Francisco. And so Kevin Collins was chosen by Michael Aquino, and because he was a Catholic young virgin boy. And he was, I named you the names of who was all involved. These were all people that were somewhat unknown, at least in the major public at that time.
So they are guilty as hell, is that correct?
They are as guilty as most people in the world are of murder, and they definitely were involved in the murder of this.
You heard that right. Chernoff claims to have been one of the kidnappers of Kevin Collins. Now it makes more sense why he was involved in the private ritual killing with his 9 relative unknowns. Another interesting case comes from someone who claims that she was sold into the MKUltra industry, Kathy O'Brien. If you don't already know, MKUltra was declassified by the CIA, which entailed mind control experiments that were being tested on US citizens beginning in 1953. More details to come in the next phase. Mark Phillips worked for the intelligence community in the 60s and 70s and saw firsthand what kind of corruption was taking place at the highest levels of government. He was a strong advocate on the idea of valuing true freedom of thought, once realizing that the majority of citizens were subject to soft mind control through the media and education systems. In a recent documentary, Kathy talks about her experience with Bohemian Grove.
I thought the whole world was saturated with this kind of criminal activity. Everything around me was involved in it. The handlers and the owners of the mind control slaves, there were so many of them that they actually had a charm school that trained the girls or guys for various sexual perversions and fulfilling them on high levels of government. We were also used for blackmailing purposes with these kind of extreme perversions. They were like strategically hidden cameras in the ceilings and in the walls that would film the perverse acts, and then the politicians or whomever, the various world leaders, were then blackmailed into compliance with the New World Order through all these videotapes. One place where they had a lot of cameras and perversions set up just specifically for this was Bohemian Grove. At Bohemian Grove, the politicians would sit around and talk about the different ways that they were going to be implementing the New World Order, different traumas that were going to be unleashed on society. One discussion that was just really horrific was using AIDS as a means of population control and introducing that in. At the Grove, when girls reached age 30, they were murdered or they were sacrificed, because at age 30, there's electrochemical changes that happen in the brain where people, sometimes those neuron pathways start changing a little bit and memory starts leaking out. We'll see where people who have been programmed specifically that are high profile, like maybe in the entertainment industries, they will start breaking up around age 30. We'll see things like about Britney Spears shaving their head. It's just part of what happens around that age.
One wig for hair super short in the mugshot.
So many government secrets and personal reputations were staked on the belief that I could never think to bring to mind, to tell their secrets, that I would never be deprogrammed to remember the things I've been programmed to forget. It was horrific knowing that so many lives were lost, so many girls when they reached age 30, and of course so often for the perversion purposes they were saying that the girls were too old to be used anymore for perversion anyway, so they were useless, just get rid of them. And I was definitely going to be killed there as well. I was to go out in a blaze of glory and be burned alive. I'm so fortunate that an intelligence insider who saw the kind of corruption that was going on in the highest levels of government saved my life so that we could begin to expose what was being done. Mark Phillips was so outraged by what he saw, he decided to take action. When he rescued me out of that situation, I had no memory whatsoever. I had no conscious thought of my own. I only knew to do exactly what I'd been programmed to do.
Kathy went through a lot, making several claims in her book that seem far too unimaginable for us to even conceptualize a human being partaking in, especially world leaders. She underwent programming from ventriloquist Alex Houston, who was able to control her against her own will to perform sex acts with him. An interview in 2000 details more about Mark Phillips' experience with Alex Houston, as well as a more detailed depiction of Phillips' personal testimony of what he went through with Kathy O'Brien.
I came to meet Alex Houston in the mid-'80s when he was introduced to me because he had an idea to put a company together with the People's Republic of China, a joint venture company. And he knew I had State Department connections, and he knew that I had business background, very successful, so he elected to make me the president of the company, and we put this business together, a legitimate business manufacturing capacitor banks for the mining industry. Well, it was the Chinese that told me that Alex Houston was involved in all these nefarious acts, and they did show me hard proof. Chinese intelligence officer told me that Alex Houston was involved in child and adult pornography, he was involved in drug running, and he was involved in money laundering for the Central Intelligence Agency, and it went all the way to the White House. Now, he alluded to that woman and her child that were in Mr. Houston's charge, I think his exact words were. He didn't say they were married. He didn't say that they were related or even anything else. He said that they were Alex Houston's charges, I believe were the exact words. After about a week, I think, of thinking about it, I went ahead and began to reconnect with some people who were still active within military intelligence. Two people I met in a restaurant in Clarksville, Tennessee, that were attached to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. They were CIA. I met with them. And these men told me, basically, that what I had heard in China was most likely true. And that they didn't personally know Alex Houston, but they knew exactly what I was talking about. And that I had, in fact, bumped into something that I couldn't do anything about. I asked them if they could please steer me in the direction of someone who could help Kathy and her daughter break free mentally of their CIA mind control existence. They told me that they would look into it, but it was too risky, in essence, that I need to look somewhere else. Why didn't I contact one of my other friends? And they had told me all they could tell me. It was at that point that I began to believe that there were plenty of good psychiatrists and psychologists, particularly the ones that have engaged in research and mind control that I knew of, like UCLA's Jolene West and others that I thought could be a possible help in helping me get Kathy and her daughter into therapy, because my intentions were to go back to China. I had no intentions of staying in the United States. During this week period of time, I discovered that my bank accounts had been pilfered. At the time that my bank accounts were just suddenly disappearing, I really, the only way I could do anything was to surmise that Kathy O'Brien might be the reason that my accounts disappeared, because I knew about her. And I had inquired as to the validity of the charges that the Chinese had given me about Alex Houston and what he was doing. There was no question. There was no question as to Kathy's mental condition at that time, because that was the first time that I'd had the opportunity to sit down with her one-on-one without anybody else being around and literally ask her some questions in a literal mode and test her level of suggestibility and determine that she was indeed under someone else's mind-controlled influence. Now, who that person was, at that point in time, I did not know, other than Alex Houston. Alex Houston called me and he said, have you talked to Kathy? I said, no. I said, I really don't talk with Kathy. He said, well, she's gone. I said, well, I wouldn't have any way of knowing. And he said, well, I can't understand it. I mean, she's gone. She's taken my VCR. And at that point in time, I was just about to fall on the floor because I just lost $2 million and he's complaining about a VCR. And I don't know why, it's still funny to this day. He was complaining about all these little things that she took out of the house, which absolutely was nothing. She took nothing, amounted to anything, except some medical equipment for her daughter and his VCR. After 2 or 3 months of taking care of my business and trying to get my money back and et cetera, I ran into another problem. This same deputy called me up and told me the sheriff of my county wanted to see me. I went to see the sheriff, and the sheriff told me, he said, Mark, I don't know what you're into. It has something to do with that woman that's in your house. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, you know that we work very closely with the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He said, someone from the FBI in the Nashville, Tennessee office came into this office and told me that you were scheduled for a hit by the CIA. I said, well, now that's their job to stop this. I said, CIA's not supposed to be operating on domestic soil, according to the Constitution. He said, Mark, I don't want to hear any of this. I want you to get out of my county. I want you to leave now. I don't care where you go. Just get out of my county. I said, well, I have a house here. I have property here. He said, sell it and leave. Give it away. Just leave it. Abandon it. Do whatever you need to do. But you're going to leave. I said, what, are you threatening me? He said, no, I'm begging you. Please leave. I was absolutely convinced that my chances of survival were 1 in a million at that point. I had nothing to lose. Everything in my life had been destroyed, it seemed like overnight, even though it took months. The process of deprogramming is really the person, you don't deprogram anybody, the person deprograms himself. You establish that they're safe, not only in reality but in their mind. You establish a trust bond between the two of you. In this case, it was absolute trust because she was seeing that I was had lost everything, that I had been a very successful businessman before, and all of a sudden nothing. I'm driving around in a Pacer. There's any number of things that were, obvious to even somebody in her condition. So it took about 9 months of her writing out her memories, and then me taking those memories, holding them 3 weeks, letting her look at them, and if she remembered them, fine. If she didn't remember them, actually I tossed them in the trash because in retrospect I did the right thing. Everything on this planet vibrates at a different rate. Absolutely everything, even on a cellular level. What we're looking at here is the effect of changing that vibration at the brainstem. And once that's done, once that's understood, which is clearly understood now, we can begin to understand how to control the mind of an individual externally by simply changing the vibration at the brainstem. Unfortunately, this is a very dangerous science because the brainstem can be damaged by combinations of harmonics. Kathy related to it as harmonic hell. And it was the sound, she claimed, of 2 rusty ships rubbing and scrubbing in the night. Well, I know this is, when she described it, it was one of those things she could not possibly have known because I was sworn to secrecy not to ever divulge that information, even though it was just describing a tone. Well, every word that you and I are saying is a combination of tones. And if we learn how to control the modulation of those tones, we can actually affect someone's subconscious. And this has been known since the 40s, quite easily, because you must remember that someone like Kathy O'Brien or anyone who's exposed to repetitious trauma prior to age 5 has an extraordinary high suggestibility level. They're very literal. Like she was telling me that she went into a place in the back of the White House that it said, "Serve us entranced." And I'm going, that's absurd in my own mind, but I'm not saying anything to her. And then all of a sudden, while sitting and going over my notes far away from her, I write it out and it says service entrance. That is the literal mind. She was told this is serve us entranced. So the next step, of course, was to see if she could remember or write out the name or person or persons who were responsible for delivering that message. Because what they actually did act as a trigger. Because she had been pre-programmed with the word entranced and serve us. Okay? In serve us of her country is the way she was taught. Well, my reaction to Kathy's first information was, in spite of all that had happened, was disbelief. First of all, I had never been exposed to the phenomena of pedophilia or adults having sex with children. It didn't equate in my mind. I knew that it was obvious, and I had studied all the Hemmer stuff, and I knew that it existed, but I didn't relate to it. And to be naming top people in Washington all the way to the presidency, including George Bush, I had a great deal of difficulty because I met George Bush, and I knew a lot of these people. I thank God didn't know Byrd. However, I did know a lot of the people she was mentioning, not personally, but I had met them at parties or had been inaugurations or whatever. And more or less in my mind, I had an acquaintance with them. I was shocked. I was in a state of shock that I could not relate to what she was saying, nor could I believe that it was all true. I thought it might be some screen memory or something that was planted memory to destroy her credibility. And at that point in time, the only proofs that I had was on Alex Houston and some operations with NASA and some events that were very specific to her victimization that occurred in the state of Alabama and Tennessee and in Michigan.
Thankfully, Mark and Kathy lived on, and he was able to deprogram her so that she could experience a much simpler and peaceful life in Alaska. Both of their lives have been ruined for speaking out about these things, which, if you think about it, seems to provide even more credibility. Why would two people spend the whole rest of their lives talking so passionately about things which immediately get detained from the public? Why would Kathy make up things that we could only correlate with a fictional story and believe it so wholeheartedly? From her traumatic experiences in MKUltra and satanic rituals, she developed a dissociative personality disorder, just like Benassi. Here is a warning for the following statements she wrote in her book, Transformation of America. On page 170, O'Brien describes how hidden cameras at the Grove were used for blackmail purposes for victims of the elite. And I quote, "Among these internationally scandalous tapes are numerous videos covertly produced at the supposedly secure political sex playground in Northern California, Bohemian Grove. According to Houston, Dante's high-tech, undetectable cameras used fiber optics, and fisheye lenses were in each of the elite club's numerous sexual perversion theme rooms. My knowledge of these cameras was due to the strategically compromising positions of the political perpetrators I was prostituted to in the various kinky theme rooms. I was programmed and equipped to function in all rooms of Bohemian Grove in order to compromise specific government targets according to their personal perversions. Anything, anytime, anywhere, with anyone was my mode of operation at the Grove." Another woman who had her life ruined for speaking out against the elites was Fiona Barnett. She, like Kathy, was sold into the MKUltra industry of Australia as a child. She was unwillingly part of a coven which was part of a greater crime syndicate involving several VIPs, and her grandparents signed her up for it before her birth. Like Paul and Kathy, Fiona claims to have had experiences at Bohemian Grove that are straight out of a horror movie.
Now I'd like to introduce to you Fiona Barnett, that's Barnett, who is one of the bravest people you will ever have the privilege to meet.
Throughout my childhood, I was a victim of Australia's VIP child sex trafficking ring. For example, I was prostituted to pedophile parties at Parliament House, Canberra, and to an international leader at Fairbairn Military Airport. The people involved in this elite pedophile ring included high-ranking politicians, police and judiciary. From the late 1980s, I reported my abuse experiences to multiple healthcare professionals, not one of whom adhered to mandatory reporting requirements. I reported to New South Wales Police in 2008. I reported to the Royal Commission in 2012. I reported to Operation Attest in Canberra. I made formal witness statements to New South Wales Police and have agreed to do more. I've reported directly to the New South Wales and Federal Police Commissioners and to the New South Wales Coroner. I have provided sufficient names, times, dates and places for authorities to investigate. My experiences were horrific beyond words. I witnessed child abduction, torture, rape, murder. But the way I've been treated for reporting the crimes I witnessed and experienced has been far worse than my original abuse experiences. Victims endure the most miserable childhoods. We then spend the rest of our lives paying for the crimes committed against us. Victims are constantly placed under excessive scrutiny. If we can't provide a precise time and date for something that happened 40 years ago, we are called liars. If we get emotional, we're labelled crazy. If we are vocal, we're just attention seekers. It's time to focus our attention away from victims and onto those responsible for the crimes against children. In the 2006 census, Australians identified child protection as their #1 concern. Why then does our government continue to ignore the public's concern for children? Australia is a pedophile haven. Our laws are written, interpreted and administered in a way that benefits pedophiles and silences victims of crime. Our university lecturers teach pro-pedophilia material. Our health boards continue to allow offending doctors and psychologists to practice. We are up to our second Royal Commission into child abuse in 20 years. The Wood Royal Commission was indeed a failure. If it was successful, I wouldn't be standing here right now. The Wood Royal Commission was established in response to complaints about the VIP pedophile ring that abused me. This is the exact same elite pedophile ring that I reported to the current Royal Commission. In 2013, I asked the Royal Commission, what are you going to do differently to the failed Wood Royal Commission? They had no answer for me. If the Royal Commission does not result in the investigation and prosecution of the VIP pedophiles that victims like me have named, then they are just information gathering. I know you want me to stand here and name names. Yet to concentrate on the names serves to shift the focus from the entire reason I'm standing here. I have provided the names to the authorities. It is their responsibility to combine my information with what other victims have presented and properly investigate. And now I will give you some VIP names. Michelle. Michelle was a friendly 12-year-old with long dark hair. I witnessed her abduction, rape and murder when I was 6 years old. Samantha. Samantha was 9 years old with wavy long brown hair and a warm smile. She had Down syndrome. Samantha was murdered when I was 12 years old. Chloe. Chloe was an attractive 4-year-old with brown straight cut hair into a bulb and sea green eyes. Chloe was murdered when I was 14 years old. Don't make this about me. Focus on those victims who couldn't be here today to personally share what happened to them at the hands of the VIP pedophiles who have infiltrated Australia's supreme institutions.
I'd been to America before a few times. So one time was a main time that stands out was when I was 6, and I was trafficked to Bohemian Grove to Richard Nixon's very close Watergate buddy, Billy Graham, the Reverend Billy Graham. Nixon assaulted me in Australia when he was over there after the Watergate thing, and then he recommended me to Billy Graham, and as a victim that would be suitable for a Bohemian Grove. Their pedophile Luciferian get together every July, their summer camp. That is nothing but a Luciferian pedophile organisation. They really do murder people there. I saw one adult murder, and and they dressed me up as a teddy bear and sent me on a hunt. The favourite thing pedophiles like to do is hunting children. The Bohemian Grove is originally a hunting organisation. They love to hunt kids. That's what they love to do, and that's what the royals like to do over in Europe. You've heard other testimonies from people. And my 6th birthday was, I attended a big hunt where they actually shot children for sport. They said, you're responsible for these kids. If you don't get them over those hills into safety, we're shooting them. And so that's, that was part of training.
Former President Richard Nixon raped me in the back of a USA CIA military plane at Australia's main military airport, the one where Air Force One lands if it visits Australia. After this, I was child sex trafficked from Sydney Airport to California, USA, in a cargo plane. I was gassed and stuffed in a wooden crate like an animal. During this trip, I was raped by media founder Ted Turner at a pedophile party held at Disneyland, and I was trafficked to the annual summer camp at Bohemian Grove, attended by notable politicians, businessmen, and other VIPs. I was raped by Reverend Billy Graham in a pink bubble-themed cabin at Bohemian Grove. Billy Graham told me that his good buddy Richard Nixon had recommended me to him. At Bohemian Grove, I was one of a group of children dressed as teddy bears and hunted for sport by men in the forest to the theme song Teddy Bear's Picnic. I also witnessed the ritual murder of a woman by male guests dressed in black Luciferian robes.
Strange that Fiona brings up the fact that she and other children were being hunted to the theme song Teddy Bear's Picnic, as famous voice actor from The Simpsons, Harry Shearer, was the director of a film called Teddy Bear's Picnic in 2002. Keep in mind this is roughly 2 years after the Bohemian Grove incident with Alex Jones. Let's take a look at some parts of the trailer which seem to point back directly to Bohemian Grove.
And the Redwood country is bracing for yet another invasion of the Zambesians. Oh no, that's not a new kind of killer bee. It's the members of California's and maybe the country's most exclusive men's club.
So I take it we were all good boys last night?
He's like a howitzer.
Looks like good makeup. You know, these days you never know when you're going to be on the news, so you wear it every day just as a precaution.
Have you ever used a video camera before?
Yeah.
Hey, you little prick! Give me that camera! Stop! You know who I am!
And that is all that you need to know right now.
It is evident from the trailer that the movie pokes fun at Alex Jones, and even humorizes the all-too-real aspects of Bohemian Grove. It should come as no surprise that drag queens have appeared at the Grove, and men have cross-dressed in their hijinks and low-jinks performances since the mid-1900s. If we think back to the Teddy Bear's Picnic movie, and even the House of Cards episode about Elysian Fields, we will begin to realize how the media purposely embeds ideas about Bohemian Grove into their films, which only few would recognize who are in the know. The media will entertain these events or ideas to exercise their authority, showing their cards subliminally, a subtle trick used to condition many moviegoers who wish to escape reality. However, what is actually real and transpires in our world trumps the fictional one once you realize that many of these stories are pulled from real-life events they don't want us to know anything about. They shove their power in our faces to show who really controls the media, and they use predictive programming to openly explain pieces of their plan before they unveil it to the public. This prepares the population to be preconditioned for it when it takes place. They hide their plans in plain sight as part of the ritual, and over the course of these videos you will begin to understand as to why.
Who's ready to Bohemian Groove? The annual power struggle will begin shortly. And now, please welcome the Sixth Society. They're a little wet, they're a little wild. It's the Atlanteans. They wear sandals and create scandals. It's the Catholic Church.
Mamma mia, bucca de beppo!
Roger Mahoney, the LA Cardinal. Ratzinger, who's now the Pope.
Here comes the toast of the undercrust. It's the Reptoids, honey. And these jokers are wild. It's the Juggalos. That's right.
If magic is all we've ever known.
What? You down to clown? We secretly control global finance.
And finally, we saved the best for last. The all-seeing, all-knowing, all-partying Illuminati! I love you, Jay-Z.
Queen Bee! Lin-Manuel!
Illuminati confirmed.
There are many more instances in movies and shows where Bohemian Grove is directly entwined. Let's take a journey through a few of these connections. The first of these is an Adult Swim TV show from 2005 called Lucy, the Daughter of the Devil. Director of the show, Lauren Bouchard, eventually went on to create the famous American sitcom Bob's Burgers. This show boasts of its surreal satire and humorizes ideas about Satan and his involvement with the elite. As you will see shortly, this show openly mocks Christianity and uses symbolism as a means of worship to their religious affiliations. In episode 6, titled Human Sacrifice, a senator by the name of Whitehead decides to run for president for the United States, and he wants to celebrate his candidacy by performing a ritual human sacrifice at Bohemian Grove. Yes, actually sacrificing a human, not just an effigy. In the episode, Satan suggests DJ Jesus for the sacrifice.
Satan! Please! No! Oh, please, God, no! Praise Satan!
Just want to let you know that we're on schedule to announce my candidacy for president. Friday night! The big sacrifice at Bohemian Grove.
Oh, 2 sacrifices in 1 week?
Master, you have to come. I mean, this one is just like friends and family, but Friday's the real one.
Yeah, fine, I'll come.
Half of Washington is flying in.
Hey, I said I'll come.
Right. Oh, hey, any requests for who we should sacrifice?
I don't know. Don't you usually do that? I just show up.
Yeah, I'm just asking in case you had someone special in mind, but I'll take care of it.
Hey, can I get your boyfriend's phone number?
Why?
I want to invite him somewhere.
Why do you want to invite my boyfriend somewhere?
I want to invite him to, like, a guys-only barbecue. I want to get to know him.
Like a bonding kind of thing?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Build a fire in the woods, get all undressed, yell at the sky.
DJ Jesus? It's Jesus. Oh, this is Bob Whitehead from the United States Senate.
Yeah, I don't give money over the phone. Please remove me from your list.
Oh, no. I don't want your money. I want to hire you to DJ this Friday.
Yeah, I'll have to check my schedule. I don't think I'll have time.
I gotta tell you, this is not just any event. Imagine the most amazing dance party / orgy / political summit on the planet.
Okay, I'm imagining that.
Did you see Eyes Wide Shut?
Yes, I did see that.
Now, get undressed.
Get undressed?
Remove your clothes.
This senator was involved in the dark arts. How deep, we did not know. And how was the DJ involved? We decided to infiltrate this gathering at Bohemian Grove.
Something like this?
No, you didn't see Eyes Wide Shut.
No, sorry.
Who cares? It's probably fine.
No, it's not fine. They'll spot us in 2 seconds with that.
Hey, I like this one.
No, it's not trick or treat. It's a very specific kind of mask.
For an orgy.
Yes, for an orgy.
Well, I just wanted to talk to you about Lucy. She needs to be the senator's date at the Bohemian Grove sacrifice.
I'm just going to a thing for my dad. Some political thing. Boring. What are you doing?
Oh, nothing. Just some gig, a bar mitzvah. It's not an orgy. I'm losing you, Luz.
It's not the kind of thing that comes
No,
from every
I
day.
can't hear you, what you just said. I can't hear. I'm going to call you later. Okay, where should I set up?
Oh, right over here in this cage.
Sweet. What's that chanting?
Nothing. Hey, I'm gonna lock this, okay?
Sure.
Hey, I'm just gonna stuff a little straw and rolled up newspaper on here. Is that cool?
Your party. Shirt on or off?
Oh, off.
Oh my gosh, I didn't think it was real, but it is. Listen to that. Father, see anything?
There's a fire.
Okay, put your masks on. I should be able to walk right in.
Minions, worship me. Kneel before me.
Hey, Satan.
10 presidents have announced their candidacy in front of this unholy altar. We celebrate the quest for power. We desecrate this ground with blood and fire.
All right, let's move to the main event. Senator?
Thank you, Master. In the name of Satan, I offer this sacrifice and command the forces of darkness to bestow upon me their infernal power.
Oh? Who's ready to boogie tonight? Let's get this party started! No cage can hold these beats.
Now, I'd like for you to ask yourself this question. Why would director Loren Bouchard include human sacrifice at Bohemian Grove as part of satire? Why is evident hatred and mockery of Jesus Christ displayed so openly by a show that promotes Satanism as a desirable and powerful religion? Why is Jesus put into a cage in the same way that Paul Benassi and other boys recalled their experiences at the Grove? Upon further inspection, this episode showcases their own 40-foot statue where they perform these satanic rituals. Similarly, several eyewitnesses have recorded their direct accounts of seeing actual human sacrifice take place during separate timelines at the real owl statue at the Grove. As we see, Senator Whitehead wears a similar-looking mask to this one worn at the Rothschild Surrealist Ball of 1972. The movie Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise was partially based on the Surrealist Ball, where director Stanley Kubrick filmed at Mentmore Towers, an English residence owned by the elite Rothschild family. The statue of Satan in this episode could represent the truth about the real owl statue, that it is inherently satanic and reveals how the Bohemian owl is actually a symbol for evil. If we take a look at the book Theodore West, Image and Impact, we will find written on page 36 an explanation of the cremation of care in relation to the success of the encampment. At the bottom of the page we read, and I quote, "Thus it ceased to be a catharsis, a celebration of the victory over care by the celebration of the encampment, becoming instead an exorcising of the demon to ensure the success of the ensuing 2 weeks." End of quote. Here it seems that the owl is referred to as a demon, meaning that the ritual at the Grove could act as a demonstration of worship. But to which demon are they referring to? Could it in fact be Lilith, or is it Moloch? Continuing on with the media and its subtle ties to the Grove, shows like Disney Channel's Gravity Falls not only promote witchcraft along with Freemasonry and the Illuminati, but are filled with a plethora of owl imagery. Here are some examples.
Rock bottom. No friends, no family, stuck watching infomercials for whatever that is. Are you sick of piles of owls constantly blocking your driveway? Well, then you gotta get Owl Trowel!
Ask yourself this question. Why would the creators of Gravity Falls make main antagonist Bill Cipher an all-seeing, all-knowing, flying and talking Illuminati symbol? The demon is even summoned by a power-hungry boy named Gideon through use of a seance.
You think that combination's safe in your mind, Stanford? We'll see what my new minion has to say about that. Triangulum, Entangulum, Veniforus Dominus Mentium, Veniforus Venentis Armium!
Oh, Gravity Falls, it is good to be back. Name's Bill Cipher. And I take it you're some kind of living ventriloquist dummy? I'm just kidding, I know who you are, Gideon.
What are you? How do you know my name?
Oh, I know lots of things.
Lots of things.
Hey, look what I can do. Deer teeth, for you, kid.
You're insane!
Sure I am, what's your point?
me, demon! I have a job for you! I need you to enter the mind of Stanford Pines and steal the code to his safe!
Wait! Stan Pines. You know what, kid? You've convinced me. I'm sold! I'll help you with this, and in return you can help me with something I've been working on. We'll work out the details later.
Deal!
Well, time to invade Stan's mind. This should be fun. Remember, reality is an illusion, the universe is a hologram. Buy gold, buy!
Gravity Falls takes an even darker turn with its nod to the 1990 TV show and crime drama Twin Peaks. This TV show is about the unsolved mysteries surrounding a town called Twin Peaks, similar to the ideas of Gravity Falls. This show follows FBI agent Dale Cooper through a series of bizarre and occultic events. There are interdimensional beings, a black lodge, and owls. This show revolves around owls. As we see in these posters for the show, its main tagline is, "The owls are not what they seem."
You routinely receive various communications, space garbage to decode and examine. They look something like this. It's radio waves and gibberish, Agent Cooper. Till Thursday night. Friday morning, to be exact.
Around the time that I was shot.
The readout took us by surprise. Row after row of gibberish, and all of a sudden, the owls are not what they seem.
The exact roles of the owls remains a mystery in both the old and new adaptations. But one thing is for certain, the owls are the eyes that see everything around the town. Bob, the main antagonist, is an entity from another realm who possesses human beings and feeds on their pain and sorrow. He is really a demon that comes out of a portal in the middle of the woods at Glastonbury Grove. The naming of the grove in the middle of the woods brings familiarity to the idea of Bohemian Grove. The portal, however, opens to this other dimension, an endless red curtain place called the Black Lodge. When we think of any Freemason lodge, each one carries black and white checkerboard tiles throughout its structure. Similarly, the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks has inverted black and white tiles which zigzag throughout its structure. In the main room are 2 pillars, and in every Freemason lodge there are 2 pillars representing duality, with their names being Jachin and Boaz. The Black Lodge is an evil place in Twin Peaks where demonic entities are summoned, in contrast the White Lodge, which is also mentioned in the series.
My people believe that the White Lodge is a place where the spirits that rule man and nature here reside. There is also a legend of a place called the Black Lodge, the shadow self of the White Lodge. The legend says that every spirit must pass through there on the way to perfection.
Upon the realization, if we compare this to Freemason lodges, what could this show be implying? At one point in the show, FBI agent Dale has a dream and ends up in the Black Lodge. He has a conversation with The Arm, one of the main villains, whose method of speaking is in a backwards language.
Is this future, bro? Is this past? Do you know who I am? I am The Arm. And I sound like this.
Backwards language is inverted. Many songs are backmasked or reversed to hide deeper meanings. A lot of these messages are overtly satanic. The uneasy red color palette matching a shade similar to blood makes me think there is something much more sinister going on. The arm even bears a ring with one of the most prominent symbols in all of Twin Peaks, an owl symbol found in a cave called Owl Cave. This owl symbol looks oddly similar to the Freemason symbol. One last thing to note about the owls are that they are the eyes and ears of the Black Lodge that take watch of the town and report back to it. If we think about the implications in relation to real-life society, the elites are the ones watching us and reporting our actions back to their own lodges. Again, this is just speculation. Returning once again to Gravity Falls, the connection between these shows with all of the occult imagery becomes even more prominent when this scene with Gideon occurs.
Oh, different fine.
Even more, the director of Twin Peaks, David Lynch, appears several times on The Cleveland Show as a cameo. In one of his scenes, Lynch shows off his new exercise video, which is literally human hunting of a female in the middle of the woods.
New exercise video. Oh. Run faster! You don't want me to catch you!
And let's not forget this scene which implies pedophilia.
Shut the front door! You're saying you were with two girls?
Yep, and if you add both of them together, they were almost age appropriate.
Say, Blood, where you get these?
And they think people would find this funny? The last piece of evidence to boost the claim that these companies genuinely understand the deeper roots of the owl comes from Disney. Disney has a show called The Owl House. The main protagonist's name is Luz, short for the biblical angel Lucifer, who rebelled against God and became Satan. In the show, Luz literally travels from what's called the human realm to the demon realm, which is inhabited by witches and demons. The central location of this realm is the Owl House. Why owls, you may ask? If you remember earlier when I talked about Lilith and how in folklore she would kidnap children and murder them, she also had the ability to transform into a screech owl. If we think about all of the reported ritual killings of children that took place at the Grove, what is even more interesting is that in this show, Owl House, a character by the name of Lilith Clawthorne can transform into a raven beast, and is associated with a show notorious for its owl imagery.
Hi there, I'm Luz Noceda. So this one day, I found a portal and ended up someplace I could have never imagined. This is the Boiling Isles, and this is the Owl House, the best place on the Isles.
Hoot hoot!
That's Hootie. Hoot hoot! He's always hanging around.
Oh, jeez!
The Owl House is where I live with
the King of Demons!
And Ida the Owl Lady, the most powerful witch on the Boiling Isle.
The Owl House premieres Friday, January 10th on Disney Channel.
It is strange how the goddess Lilith would hunt down children. And when we think of Fiona Barnett, she claims that the Bohemian Club is in fact a hunting organization. If we retrace our steps to European secret societies such as the Illuminati and Schlaraffia, we now understand the common thread of owl symbolism between the two. But what if I told you there was another organization which predated both of these secret societies and was centered around the Bavarian and Bohemian regions of Europe? This society is called the International Order of Hubertus, which follows the legend of French nobility bishop Saint Hubertus. According to their website, and I quote, "At an early age, Hubert was drawn to one of the pleasurable activities of young nobles, the hunt, called la chasse. In fact, the hunt of animals was the primary activity in which he spent his days. His love for the chase was such that he gradually stopped practicing any religious affiliation, instead spending his days in the fields and woods, trapping and hunting." End of quote. There seems to be an element of truth to Fiona's hunting organization claims, especially when we read further down the page, we find that orders which honored Hubertus were Bavarian and Bohemian in nature. And just like these secret societies, one can only be invited into it by an active member. Even more suspicious, found through more research on their website, they have their own Grand Masters, similar to Freemasonry, and it's officially a knightly order. But the most interesting aspect of this hunting organization is that it stems to America, and the first vestiture of American Knights took place at the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. There have been many individuals who have come forward describing similar experiences with human hunting. Fiona Barnett is not alone in her claims. Some say hunts took place on property for them at Bohemian Grove, or they name a common individual who enjoyed these things such as Dick Cheney or President George Bush. All of these people claim to have had strikingly similar experiences with being raised in generationally abusive families who sold them into MKUltra with the Central Intelligence Agency. As a result of being sexually abused, these people learn to disassociate their trauma by developing multiple personality disorders. A man by the name of J.R. Sweet has spent most of his life trying to warn people about the horrific realities of mind control and human trafficking. He grew up in the Mormon Church and has a testimony revolving around a satanic subdivision within the church itself. Just like Mark Phillips and Kathy O'Brien, Sweet had many terrifying encounters with ventriloquist Alex Houston.
I was raised in a generationally abusive family, a satanic family bloodline, essentially. My family reaches back, as you mentioned, to King Henry VIII. So I was selected because of my ability to dissociate. We were tested as children, tested by a man named Alex Houston to test us for our ability to disassociate. And that took place at my grandfather and grandmother's house outside of Nampa, Idaho at Lake Lowell. And that was a pretty traumatic little ordeal there. They had a guy coming out to entertain us kids. And so we were all waiting, and as little kids, we were excited. This guy had a dummy doll thing that he was going to show us, and do a little show for us. And so he came up the drive finally. It was evening, and he did a little show for us, Alex and Elmer, I want to say, his dummy. Yeah, and they did this show for us. And then after the show, they said that they wanted to do a test. They wanted to do something with us kids. And so each one of us was taken back into a room there with Alex, and we were tested for our ability to dissociate. And so what that entailed is we were taken back there one by one, first of all, and my sister was first. And they had in the room a box that had a hand in it. It was a severed human hand, and they just opened it. So my sister went back there, and what the thing was, would you dissociate? And so my sister screamed when she went back there, and they showed it to her. And then my older brother, he was taken back, and he screamed when he saw the human hand. He didn't dissociate. And then when I was taken back, I didn't scream. I saw the hand, and I just dissociated from the situation. I was there with my grandfather and his friend. I just dissociated. And so I was taken back. And so I was selected for trauma-based mind control programming sponsored by the Central Intelligence Agency, because there's a lot of people doing it, not just the CIA. The satanic, what I call the satanic elite, are also doing it. Really rich people, what we consider to be the elite, a lot of them, I'm not saying all, I don't know that for sure, but what I witnessed was a lot of them are involved with Satanism and trauma-based mind control. They put their own kids through it. When I first started to remember these things, I had a friend of mine ask me, he said, why would they do this? Why would they want someone like that? Why wouldn't they just have an agent or a soldier do that? It's not all black and white. And if you have a healthy-minded individual who is your agent or soldier, and you tell them, I want you to kill this man who is an enemy of the state, and I want you to kill his wife and his children as well, that individual is going to say, he's going to question that, or she. That individual, if they're a healthy-minded individual, is going to question that. That's immoral. And that's one of the reasons that they want mind slaves. It is because they don't remember, because they will do things such as smuggle drugs or be used in porn or be used for blackmail or be used for assassination, and they won't remember. but it's also because they will do what you tell them to do without question.
Sweet brings up a great point when talking about the need for people to be compliant as a mind slave without questioning the immoral actions they are committing. In another interview, he talks about the most dangerous game, or the hunt, and how he was made to run away from his own grandfather.
So I want to clarify to folks why I'm here in the first place, because these things aren't easy to do. It's not easy to talk about, and it comes with a great amount of risk. And the reason that I'm here and that I'm talking to you today is because I'm a survivor of the Central Intelligence Agency's trauma-based mind control program. It involves trauma, disassociation, abuse, sexual abuse, a lot of very evil and devious things. Really, what it boils down to is it's very illegal, first of all, what the United States government is doing. The Central Intelligence Agency, the White House knows about it. They're involved with it. The Pentagon knows they're involved with it. But it's illegal, it's immoral, and it's unconstitutional, and it should be stopped. And the people have the power to stop it if they know about it. That is what makes it so top secret, is they understand that. And they don't want people to know about it. It gets out in little bits here and there, but they don't want people to know about it. The key to trauma-based mind control is trauma and disassociation. That's why it's called trauma-based mind control, because they use trauma to cause you to disassociate and create in you what is called a multiple personality disorder. And this is what I prefer to call a multiple personality disorder and compared to a dissociative identity disorder, because they create multiple personalities within you. Yes, it is a dissociative identity disorder, but they're creating multiple personalities within you so that they can use you for various things. And you can go about your daily life living as a normal individual in society, and no one would suspect who you are. So it begins with trauma. They traumatize you from the time that you're born. And the most horrid kind of trauma to inflict on a child is sexual abuse by their family. So I was abused by my family, by my father, by my grandfather, by my uncle, various other individuals from the time that I was born. As far back as I can remember sexual abuse in our family. And this is generational. I come from a satanic generational incestual bloodline. And so it's been going on in my family for a very long time. And those are the strongest children to disassociate, is my understanding, are children from satanic bloodlines who have, their family has a history of incestual abuse. I was owned, literally owned as a slave by the Central Intelligence Agency, called a mind slave. MK Ultra, they're seeking out these children, and then they are putting them into the project. And then they are raised under a very scientifically formulated process designed by the CIA. The CIA didn't invent it. They're not the first ones to start doing this. Satanic families have been doing it for a long time, and Satanists. And so it's nothing new, but the CIA has enhanced it greatly to a scientific process. Someone else that I would like to mention who's involved with these things is the Satanic Elite. We've discussed them a little bit. I've mentioned them, but these are the elite families, the families that I personally had contact with and witnessed them enduring the same mind control programming I was. Was the Ford family in particular. I can remember they were at the most dangerous game when I was made to play that.
play that. When I was made to do that and be involved in that in Oklahoma, and the Hiltons were also there at that game in Oklahoma. The Hilton girls, Nikki and Paris, were both there. I played the most dangerous game with Nikki and Paris, and during the games, one of them had become injured, and I tried to help those girls, and after that, it didn't end well for me or for them. I don't believe. I didn't see what happened to the girls after I was made to run, because my grandfather started shooting at me or shooting above my head to make me run, because he later told me that Mr. Hilton would have shot me if I had gone to help the girls. And so I was made to run, my cousin and I. Not only do they want children who are multiples who will do anything they tell them to do, they also need these individuals, these children, to never remember what they were made to do. The trauma helps with that, the hypnosis, and then electrocution. They will use an electric taser and hit you with a taser to compartmentalize that memory. And they find a spot on your body, and that's where they're going to hit you forever, is in that spot. Sometimes they get mixed up, and you'll be with someone else, like Bird even messed up once in a while, and he'd hit my left thigh instead of my right thigh.
I knew a lot of these people. I thank God didn't know Bird.
And so they do screw up sometimes, but for the most part, you're supposed to be hit in that specific location.
Just like J.R. Sweet, Cathy O'Brien talks about her personal memories of being hunted in relation to conditioning the mind and traumatizing a victim. Hunting involves politicians, CIA agents, and various elites. In her book, Cathy mentions Dick Cheney and George Bush Sr. as the more notable people who hunted her from an early age. She was stripped completely naked. Wearing just tennis shoes, she was demanded to run. In addition, J.R. talks about his uncle, who went to observe Britney Spears' programming at Bohemian Grove. What's interesting to note is how he mentions that people who partake in these things have to be very discreet about it so that the members of their family will never know the things they do behind the scenes. Do you believe what he is saying to be true?
My uncle told me while I was putting on my uniform, this is something I want to mention, is that he initially had told me he was going to stay. And he was going to wait for the ceremony to end. He would do something else there in the mountain, and then he'd leave with me. Well, he told me when I was getting dressed, "You're going to have to be here alone. I've got to go." He said, "I just heard that Britney Spears is being programmed in Bohemian Grove right now, and I want to go catch some of that." And he talked to me about Britney for a while.
You've had a year that would test a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Illness in the family. Mm-hmm. A breakup, this spasm of publicity about what happened from Mexico to London.
It was pretty rough, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Ah, weird. Hello. Oh my goodness, hello. Ew, strong Britney. Yeah, it was a weird time. Ew, I'm embarrassed. Can we stop this?
Yes, Britney Spears is a trauma-based mindset, and he wanted to go be involved with her programming and her. He's just a sicko, really. He just wanted to be involved with abusing her. And then he talked to me about it. He was like, do you like Britney? Would you like to, have sex with Britney sometime? And I was a young man, and I was a mind slave, and I was like, well, sure, I guess so, yeah. And so my uncle left that night, and he went to Bohemian Grove. And he ended up having to go home early because his cover had been compromised, and something had happened where his family was wondering where he was at, because these people have to do all these things and keep it hidden from their families.
Another story comes from Kathy Collins, someone who grew up near Bohemian Grove in Santa Rosa, California. She had a lot of trauma resulting from the San Francisco Presidio, as well as the Grove. Her father sold her into Project Monarch, a sub-project of the MKUltra CIA mind control program, where she was heavily abused throughout the early stages of her life.
I was born in Santa Rosa, California, which was a major center, and a lot of my experiences were in the Presidio and Bohemian Grove.
What's the Presidio?
The Presidio is in San Francisco. And how did I get into this program? It was through my father's connection in the Navy, and he would be considered what some people call a handler. So he was responsible for me being in the program. I also have a brother who was part of the program, who's younger than me. So here are my credentials. Yes, I was sexually abused by my father from infancy. I probably experienced trauma during the fetal stages because that's very typical. I was probably born with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, so I never really knew what it was like to be quote-unquote normal. So that was a little difficult with recovery because there's no memory of where to go back to. So I was prostituted, so I was used by both men and women. I was experimented upon. I do remember electric shock. I remember being subjected to strobe lights and so forth. There were lots of experiments.
Experimental drugs, I believe.
Experimental drugs, too. I was used in satanic rituals from a very young age, and I remember going through an initiation ritual at age 3 that involved somebody forcing me to drink blood. I remember age 5 being strapped to a slab, and the intent was to take my soul. And then an incident at Bohemian Grove where I was forced to watch child sacrifice. Because the memories were so horrific, then what I did is I suppressed them, and I had amnesia about my childhood for many, many, many years. And then the memories started to resurface. And because they'd been suppressed for so long, there was a huge reaction.
According to her full testimony, Kathy was carted away in a potato sack by her father and went through a satanic initiation ritual at age 3 where she was forced to drink blood. She vividly remembers attending Bohemian Grove at age 5, where she was stripped naked and tied to a stone altar. 3 hooded figures surrounded her who tried to steal her soul but couldn't break her. Kathy was forced to watch a child sacrifice at Bohemian Grove and only escaped from mind control and abuse because her father died later on in her life. She also claims to have been hunted for sport at the Grove. Here are a couple more survivor testimonies on human hunting rituals which took place at Point Sal and Dick Cheney's estate.
So going back to when I was 15 years old, this was my leading man in high school in Babes in Toyland, and I had some grooming. I was the lead in every single play in my years in high school. His father worked at Vandenberg Air Force Base and eventually for NASA when they moved to Florida. According to my sister, he was also in the elite MKUltra program. To train us, we were hunted at Point Sal and Guadalupe Beach in the middle of the night, and we were lucky to escape this alive. We had all been at the party at church. There was a hayride that we were all on. Steve S., who openly told me he worked for the CIA, was the driver. He took us up to the Los Alamos entrance of the tunnel. We were all stripped naked and taken to the beach where we were told we had to make it to Guadalupe Beach without being shot or we would not live. We were going to be hunted. We had to swim or climb around the first set of rocks to get to the beach. It was a low tide, so it was fairly safe to swim. The moon was out so we could see, but then so could the people who were hunting us. We all stuck together at first, but the slower ones who couldn't swim very well were shot with a tranquilizer gun, but we thought they were real guns and we were terrified. We used the shadows. We helped each other as much as we could. There was one part of the rocks that we couldn't get around or over without a rope. And DR was tall, so he found a rope and set it up for the rest of us. When we got to Guadalupe Beach, we used the sand to cover up in. We then ran through the sand dunes as a shortcut down the road. We were running down the road naked and had escaped. There were 6 of us who never were shot at that night. Now, it started out as a lot larger group.
First of all, want to say that I give honor to my earthly parents. I do not know everything my parents went through in their lives to bring them to the places that they were. And so I don't ever want to do anything that is dishonoring. And above all, I give all the glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, because he is the one who has brought me through. But I do want to say from the start that Freemasonry is a cult, and it damages everyone that is in it and every family member associated with it. They would often do what is called hunting games, which I know is real big with Dick Cheney and his estate. But they would often take as children to a very secluded forest. It was a private estate, and there was a large fence around this forest. And they would strip all of his children naked, and they would tell us to run for our lives. And if we were caught, they were going to kill us. If you didn't do what they said, which many times I didn't, they would shoot a child right in front of you and kill it. And they would say, that is your fault. That's what's going to happen if you don't do what we say. At this one memory, I was older because I was about 16 or 17, and they would line us all up and they would tell us to run. And I ran for my life, and I was hiding in a clump of bushes when I saw this little 5-year-old girl and little 3-year-old boy, a little brother and sister, run past me. The little boy was wearing bright red tennis shoes, but other than that, they were completely naked. I knew they would be caught because they were so little, they didn't know where to go. I jumped out of my hiding space. I grabbed the girl's hand. She had the boy's hand, and we just ran. We ended up running to the back of this property. There was a very large wooden fence there. I started looking at the bottom of the fence because there was a couple of areas where the wood was starting to rot away a little. I started kicking it with my foot. I actually broke several toes because I was barefoot. I kept kicking and kicking with my foot until I could break out a couple of the slats of wood. I dug as frantic as I could with my hands to make a little well in the dirt. I grabbed the children and I shoved them under it. The wood actually cut into their backs as I was shoving them under. I got them both under, and I peeked through a little crack in the wood, and I could see their sweet little naked backsides running. And I told them, I said, don't stop running until you find help. And the last thing I remember was them running in those little tiny red shoes running.
Returning back to Fiona Barnett, her claims about Bohemian Grove and what supposedly transpired between her and Billy Graham will probably upset most Christians upon hearing what she believes happened to her. But Billy Graham was indeed a best friend of Richard Nixon, who we now know attended Bohemian Grove from time to time and recalled eating lunch with Herbert Hoover and Dwight Eisenhower. Graham was also best friends with the Bush family, specifically George W. Bush, who has had many allegations drawn against him by people involved in MKUltra mind control testing relating to sexual abuse. He is also a well-known member of the Bohemian Club and has attended the Grove with his father multiple times. He's even part of Skull and Bones, a secret society club which meets at Yale. Here's what he says when prompted questions about what they do in Skull and Bones.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322.
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look forward.
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
Are there really great secrets that you know that you can't share with people?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. And you never write about them.
No.
Maybe at a time in your life that
No.
you're like, oh, I'm 90, I'm going to do it.
No.
No, nothing.
Now, I'm not claiming as a fact that people like Ryan Garcia, Paul Benassi, Mark and Kathy, and Fiona Barnett are telling the truth, but I am pointing out the obvious. Bohemian Grove is a common thread between all of these people. So is MKUltra and dissociative personality disorder due to abuse-related trauma. They all make compelling cases. Ultimately, use your own discernment, think for yourself, and make up your own mind. I certainly believe these things to be true, and the next person may disagree. Maybe they force themselves to disagree so they can sleep better at night. What is a fact, though, is that Bohemian Grove exists. Mind control exists. And that people would never put their lives on the line to defend a lie. Lastly, owls are literally hunters. So when we think about Fiona saying that Bohemian Grove is a hunting organization, and Hunter S. Thompson's Owl House is where he likes to kill things, this connection doesn't seem too far-fetched. What is also a fact is that owl symbolism is hidden in plain sight within our country, a symbol for possible sacrifices toward Moloch at Bohemian Grove. The owl is directly tied to the Illuminati, Schlarafia, Washington, D.C.'s layout, and Disney. It all goes back to Disney. Owl symbolism appears throughout the dwarf's cottage in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for a reason. Walter Elias Disney attended Bohemian Grove in 1936, and here is a picture of a couple pages straight from his journal, where we can see the owl statue and the lamp of fellowship drawn over the page. If we look at page 136 of Bob Thomas's book, Walt Disney, an American Original, he mentions what happened during Disney's visit, and I quote, "In 1936, he was invited to the annual encampment of the Bohemian Club, a San Francisco organization of artists and civic figures. The ritual consisted of wining, feasting, and camping out in a redwood grove north of San Francisco Bay. When Walt returned to the studio, he complains of being unable to sleep because of the symphony of snores in nearby tents. He described and reproduced each of the snores to the hilarity of his story Men. The result was the snoring sequence in the dwarf's cottage." End of quote. Not only does the dwarf's cottage connect directly to Walt Disney's experience with Bohemian Grove, but the owl symbolism we discussed earlier now verifies this correlation. It seems that Walt Disney had a fascination with Bohemian Grove and the owl, but was never keen on disclosing this information to the public. Its connection is much darker than what meets the eye. Walt Disney has a lot of secrets hidden in his films, theme parks, and more. Join me in Phase 3 as we expose Walt Disney's darkest secret yet.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
These things, they sound like they can't be happening. Ted Gunderson, respected law enforcement professional, recently or retired now from the FBI, former regional director of Los Angeles. Do you, sir, believe that these dreadful allegations of babies being sacrificed are true?
I absolutely believe it, without any doubt. Based on the information that's been given to me across the country by numerous survivors and by confidential sources and informants.
Then why didn't you name these people and arrest them? Never a name, never an arrest. These women come out of a group and they insist that they know the people in the group, and yet they do not identify these large, mysterious cults. Name them and arrest them and get them off the street.
Does he not make a valid point?
He makes a valid point. The problem with that is, number one, police officers don't believe it. I may believe it. You may believe it. Some people in your audience may believe it. They don't believe it. Number two, if you decide to investigate these people, you have to, number one, handle it from an undercover operation. If you put an undercover operation into effect, then you have, in a sense, your own police officers become involved in these heinous crimes, and they are, of course, become murderers. And in addition to that, if you do decide to investigate these people, there's a lot of work. And many law enforcement officers are apathetic and don't want to get involved.